Are we live? Yeah, good evening, my dear students. Welcome to the BOS live learning classes for the indirect tax laws. My name is Vignesh. I'm a practicing chartered accountant from Hyderabad since the past 10 years and have been giving these live learning classes in association with the Board of Studies ever since it has started from the year 2020. So this has been, I think, my sixth or seventh batch for which I am uh, giving my learnings and giving my views on the chapters for GST to the students across the country. I hope all of you have a thorough understanding of the topics which has been dealt in the two modules, because a lot of what we are going to discuss relates to the topics which you have covered. So it is an expectation that you need to have a basic idea of the various concepts pertaining to supply, invoice, input tax credit, etc. before we go into this topic. So the topic which has been given to me today as well as tomorrow pertains to offences, penalties, and ethical aspects under the GST law. This is what is the topic which is given to me. And I would request you to also parallelly open your study material, because most of the study material is there in the content what I'm giving, which I'll also be uploading in the link which is being given. So this is your chapter number 21, which pertains to offences and penalties and ethical aspects under the GST. So an introduction here is basically what we are going to cover in this topic is the various offences which are there in GST, which is very, very important for you, not only from the examination point of view, but also from the view where eventually most of you, or I'm hoping all of you, qualify as chartered accountants. When you wish to practice in the areas of GST, to know the criticality of the provisions, how serious and stringent are the provisions pertaining to the GST, you will know when the various offences are given and the various penalties which are there for the offences which are covered. We also have cases which involve prosecution. When I say prosecution, it means where imprisonment is involved. Imprisonment also is involved in certain very critical cases where the tax and penalty tax amount is involving a huge sum. There is also provisions given for arrest. So prosecution related provisions also we will be discussing. And apart from this, there is also a separate topic which is dedicated to the ethical aspects under the GST. When we say ethical aspects here, it speaks about us as a chartered accountant. What are we supposed to keep in mind when we are advising the clients with regard to the GST aspects? Okay, we need to be very true to our profession. We need to have the basic integrity and the basic necessary skills and knowledge when we are advising our client. And whenever we are giving certifications, which involves our signature, we need to be very careful and properly verify whether all the provisions of the CGST Act or the IGST Act has been complied. So therefore, ethical aspects, we will cover that dimension. It will basically cover all your the basic provisions, what you have to keep it in mind whenever you're advising your clients, whenever we give an opinion with regard to the GST provisions, what all has to be kept in mind is basically covered under the ethical aspects, where we will also be discussing certain case studies which covers topic and what exactly as a chartered accountant we are supposed to do. So that will be the course for both the sessions, that is today and tomorrow. And I would urge you to please be as interactive as possible, because the topic what we are discussing is slightly a dry topic compared to the topics which relate to time of supply, input tax credit, place of supply, etc., which has multiple provisions where you need to be more analytical in your thinking, and we need to work out multiple problems. This topic is more of a theory and a rules related topic. So wherein we will be discussing a lot of rules and a lot of provisions which are covered in the CGST Act, which speaks about the offences. So therefore, let us be as interactive as possible, and I would urge you to keep asking as many questions as possible so that we keep the correct flow of the discussion throughout the course of these coming 3 hours. So therefore, if you look at the introduction here, so first of all, why are penal provisions? When I say penal provisions, it talks about the penalty related provisions in any act. So why are the penalty related provisions important in any legal framework for that matter? When it comes to income tax, when it comes to Companies Act, why do you think, I would request you all to give your opinions or answers here, why do you think a penalty clause is required in any act? Why do you think a penalty law is required in any other act? What is the reason for any particular legal ordinance, any particular act to have a penalty provision? Why do you think that is happening? I'll wait for like a few seconds for you to give your views. Why do you think a penalty is important for any legal framework or any act? Why do you think a penalty provision is there? Because every act has a penalty. It can be any act for that matter. It can be Income Tax Act, it can be your Companies Act, but there is always a penalty provision which is required. So why do you think that is needed? The main reason why a penal provision is required: reduce offense. Very good. Mr. Pradeep has said to reducing offense. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to Shailesh, Viraj, Mansha, Kirti, Kanha. Yeah, for reducing offense. So therefore, a measure for mitigation or reduction of commission of any offense. Okay. So therefore, if what are all the offenses which are listed out? Basically, what is the offense here when we discuss? It is some legal provision, some provision of the CGST Act which is not being followed in letter and spirit. Maintain peaceful, otherwise all are not followed tax. Okay. Stop tax evasion. Very good, sir. For compliance of law in time, accurate information. Yeah. So most of you are you're right when it comes to these answers. So therefore, it is the penal provision is important to ensure efficient enforcement of laws. And also one more thing is, how do you motivate the genuine taxpayers to make the compliance? So therefore, when I am a correct taxpayer, when I'm following the provisions of the law in letter and spirit, and if there is someone who does not follow the law in the letter and spirit, and if you don't have any actions to be taken against, or you don't have any serious actions to be taken under such a person, obviously the genuine taxpayer have all right to feel offended, and they feel that when I am doing everything right, and when that other person is doing everything wrong, why is it that he is not being punished? So this question will come for anyone. So that is the main reason why the penal provisions are required. So therefore, there is no definition as such for the word penalty, but due to various pronouncements are there, various case laws are there, wherein the courts have laid down what is the nature of penalty: temporary punishment or sum of money to be paid as a punishment. So therefore, when there is a commission of certain offense, what is an offense? We'll come to it in the next point. So therefore, if there is any offense which has been done, for that, what is a temporary punishment or a sum of money? Okay, this is basically what is a penalty or a punishment imposed for doing or failing to do something that was duty. So if someone has to do a particular duty, if you want me to take an example here in GST, in input tax credit, it is the responsibility of the recipient of the supply of goods. Okay, for whenever he's claiming the input tax credit, it is a responsibility of the supplier to file the respective invoices in the GSTR1. That is his responsibility, because only if he fulfills that responsibility, I will get to claim the input tax credit, and I'm supposed to claim the recipient and claim the input tax credit only once it is reflected in the system. So if the recipient claims extra input tax credit, which is not reflected in the system, that means he is doing something which he is not supposed to do, which is basic. For that, a punishment is imposed, which is called as a penalty. So what is offense? Offense means nothing but a violation or breach of law. Very simple. Punishable by way of penalties, fines, imprisonment, other legal actions, if any, based on the severity of the violation. So also, You cannot have a single punishment to all the offenses. The degree of offenses vary. Some offenses can be very minor. Some offenses can be very major. So what are the minor offenses? For example, in the tax invoice which you are supposed to give to your customer, you have forgotten to put the date, or you have entered the incorrect date. But you have collected the taxes from him. You have paid the taxes to the government. He has also claimed the necessary input tax credit. Here, it's a minor offense. There is no revenue loss to the government. But in case you're collecting GST from your customer, that GST, instead of paying to the government, you're keeping it with you. You have invested those in shares. And I'll tell you how the normal person's brain works in such cases. In the month of, say, I'll give you an example here. In the month of November 2023, I made a supply of goods. I made a supply of, say, 10 lakhs, of which I have collected 18% GST. So 1.8 lakhs as such is the GST what I've collected. Now I have time till December 20th to make the payment of GST. What I have done, that 18 lakhs I have taken, and 18 lakhs I've invested in shares. Okay, I've invested in shares. That 18 lakhs of the GST amount which I've collected from my customer, I've invested in shares, and before 20th I sell the shares. I take the risk. The shares value will increase. I may make a profit, and before 20th I sell the shares, make the profit, and this one I will pay the tax. These are some of the things what the businessmen do, which is definitely an offense, because the moment you are doing this investment in shares of the tax what you have collected from your customer, that means you are using the money which has to be paid to the government for your own personal motive. This is a major offense. So therefore, minor and major offenses, different types of penalties are prescribed. In certain specified cases, wherever the penalty is levied, this mens rea is very important. What is mens rea? It is there in every legal framework, every law as such. Guilty mind or culpable mental state. So therefore, the intention or the knowledge of the person should be there when he commits an offense. That will increase the seriousness of the offense. If the mens rea is not present and a mistake has been made, then it will be categorized as a minor offense. But if mens rea is there, then the penalties and the offenses are more serious, and the penalties are also more stringent. Penalty is a monetary punishment for contravention of the act. Not necessarily, the monetary punishment also is prescribed, but as I told you earlier also, in serious cases, imprisonment also is there. Otherwise, government not collecting revenue properly, that is correct. It is motivation for the government to collect the tax, because the moment a person is scared of penalties, he will make sure that he pays the taxes on time, reducing contravention of laws. So therefore, these are some of the reasons why the penalty is levied. Thank you for all your opinions. So therefore, I hope all of you understood why the penalty is important for any offense as such in any legal framework. So therefore, prosecution, as I told you, in certain cases, imprisonment will be involved, where formal charges will be instituted against the offender. So therefore, legal proceedings will be enforced not only as per the GST law, but Code of Criminal Procedure also will come into place. See, serious offenses, also the police officers will be involved in respect of arresting of that person. So not only the GST commissioner will be after you, also the police officer, the local police department also will be after you. So therefore, there is also cognizable and non-cognizable offenses. This we will discuss in our coming slides. Cognizable offenses and non-cognizable are lesser serious ones. Cognizable offenses are non-bailable. That means you will not get bail also. Straight away you will be arrested. The provisions which are containing these respective rules, section 122 to 138 of the CGST Act, contains all the provisions relating to offenses, penalties, detention of the goods, seizure, confiscation, also compounding of offenses. What is compounding of offenses? Can anyone tell me? What do you mean by the word compounding? Compounding of offenses. Compounding of offenses. Can anyone tell me what do you mean by the word compounding of offenses? You must have read this word somewhere else as well. Waiting for some answers. Compounding of offenses. In Companies Act also, I think there is a chapter with relating to compounding. So, anyone? Okay, so I'll keep continuing. Meanwhile, if there's any answers, please keep typing it in the query link so that I get to know what your views are on this. Before that, we'll just go to some basic definitions which are covered with regard to the terms what we are going to use in the various provisions what we are discussing. Conveyance, very simple, straightforward definition. Inclusive definition includes a vessel, aircraft, and a vehicle. So all these three put together comes under conveyance. Person definition you would have already seen in the introduction class as well. Person definition is already covered at multiple places, but for you also to be as a revision and the reiteration, you can go through this definition. 2 subsection 84 defines person, individual, HUF, company, firm, LLP, association of person or body of individuals, corporation or body corporate, cooperative society, local authority, central government, society, trust, and every artificial juridical person not falling within any of the above. So this is basically a definition of the person. So all these are covered in the definition of the person. One or more than one offense. See, compounding of offenses means what? It means in case there is an offense, but I want to compound it. That means I'm accepting that I'm committing an offense. Please minimize the punishment for me. Okay, please minimize the punishment for me. Yeah, exactly. Compounding offense means paying certain amount to compounding authorities in order to relieve from prosecution of offenses. To some extent, what Mr. Satish here has said is correct. So whatever you have to pay any amount, if you want to avoid prosecution or want to minimize the punishment, you can apply for the comp by paying certain amount upfront. This is your compounding of offenses, which also we will cover in our discussion. So this is your definition of person under 2 subsection 84. I hope this is clear. Any queries here you can ask. I'm presuming that this definition has already been discussed because it's a very common definition, keeps coming. Registered person, also in the registration chapter, you would have touched upon this definition. It means a person who's registered under 25, but does not include a person having a unique identity number. Unique identity number is given to certain specified persons like embassy or United Nations representative for a temporary purpose. For it does not relate to collecting of tax, etc., just to identify that particular person. So whoever is registered under 25, section 25 of the CGST Act 2017 talks about registration. So whoever is registered under section 25 is a registration person. So I hope all of you are familiar with the various threshold limits beyond which the registration is compulsory. I hope all of you are also familiar with voluntary registration, which talks about even though your threshold does not cross, you can still get yourself registered under the CGST Act. I hope all of you are quite familiar with all these topics. Taxable person is who? A person who is registered or liable to be registered under 22 or 24 of the CGST Act 2017. This concept also must have been covered in your registration chapter. When I say who is registered, that means a person who is already applied for the registration and he has allotted a GST number. And when I say liable to be registered, what does that mean? That means the person has crossed the threshold limit, that is 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs as the case may be. And after he has crossed, he has not obtained registration still. Still, he is supposed to be a taxable person as per section 2 subsection 107. Regulations means what? The regulations made by the board under the act on the recommendations of the council. Very simple. Whatever the GST council also you must have, I hope all of you have a familiar understanding. Again, if someone are not familiar with this registered person, registration, GST council, etc., you have a lot of catching up to do. You have to attend all these classes which have been held before so that you get an idea of what exactly this is. So GST council meets periodically, where the finance ministers of all the states and the union finance minister sit together and formulate the GST policies. So whatever regulations they make, it comes under the regulations. Proper officer, again, is a simple definition in relation to any function, means the commissioner of the officer of the central tax who is assigned that function by the commissioner in the board. So whoever is the person who is in charge of the GST assessment, who issues a notice to the taxable person to substantiate his claims of input tax credit, or can be any issue for that matter. He is a proper officer under 2 subsection 91. So those were the basic definitions. Now we straight away come into the main section, that is section 122 subsection 1. If you see in the study material, I would request you to open the page number. I'll just tell you the page number. Page number 21.5. 21.6 also has the main definition. You can go through the sections parallelly as we discuss the relevancy of the points. These offenses, 21 offenses are prescribed under section 122 subsection 1. 21 offenses are prescribed. So in the study material, we have divided it based on to what the offense pertains to. So some offense pertains to invoice, some offense pertains to tax evasion, that ways. So therefore, we will discuss each offense based on the relevant section where it is covered. When I say section, it means the aspect what it relates to. So therefore, these are the 21 offenses. Let us go through it headwise, as in to what aspect it covers. So the first thing what we are going to discuss is offenses related to invoice. Can anyone briefly tell me in 1-2 lines, what do you mean by the term invoice? What do you mean by the term invoice? Can anyone just briefly tell me? Just 1 or 2 lines. I don't need any detailed description. Can anyone just briefly tell me, what do you mean by the term invoice? What do you mean by the term invoice? Once we understand what exactly is the term, then we can look at what are the offenses which are covered under the term invoice. I'll keep you asking many questions which relates to your old topics. I'll have to see whether all of you are able to recollect and remember what has been taught earlier. Description of goods or services provided and tax collected. Okay, Satish has given his opinion on what is an invoice. Others? Pradeep, Kirti, Geeta, good evening. I think you have just joined, but I'll still ask you the question. Shailesh, Viraj, your opinion, or what do you think is the term invoice? Written document tells us about goods and services, sort of agreement. Okay, multiple views are given. So tax invoice basically is a document which gives the details about the goods or services that are being supplied. It gives the value of the goods or services which are being supplied. It gives the details of the GST rate, whether it is CGST and SGST, if it is intrastate supply, and if in case it is interstate supply, IGST is clearly mentioned. It gives the details about the place of supply. It gives the details of the recipient, address of the recipient, GST number of the recipient, HSN code or SAC, service accounting code. HSN code is for goods, service accounting code is for services. So these are all the important aspects which are given in a document. This document evidences that you are going to supply or the goods or services to the respective recipient, and once you issue this tax invoice to your customer, only then he will make the respective payment to you. So that in brief was that refers to the term invoice. Instrument given by the supplier to the buyer. Someone said it is agreement. Agreement is different from invoice. Don't get confused. Agreement is basically an understanding between the supplier and the recipient for the supply of various goods. An example is if there is a construction contract, the supplier engages in agreement with the recipient. In that he will say, a construction of first floor I will charge so much, construction of second floor I will charge so much, third floor I will charge so much. Both will agree to it and sign. That is an agreement. But invoices, whenever he has to get any money from the recipient, as per GST law, he has to raise a tax invoice on the respective recipient. So therefore, Offenses related to invoice. Now we come back. So if any, where a taxable person, again, what is taxable person? We just saw the definition. Be very, 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 very important point you understand. Taxable person and registered person are not one and the same. Taxable person includes registered person, but a person who is liable to be registered also is a taxable person. I hope you are getting that. So therefore, your turnover has crossed 20 lakhs. You are supposed to get GST and you have to supposed to get registered under GST. You're not supposed to, still you are a taxable person. So again, it comes under this 122 subsection 1. I hope you got that clarity. That is very important. So therefore, what are the offenses we come here? So where a taxable person supplies any goods or services or both without issue of any invoice or issues incorrect or false invoice with regard to the supply. So therefore, first thing, if you are a taxable person, you cannot supply the goods or services without issue of the invoice. Important point. Please make a note of it, everyone. Invoice issuance is prerogative for making a supply of goods or services. So therefore, if you supply the goods or services without issue of invoice, that means it is an offense. That is one type. The second type is if you issue an incorrect or false invoice. That means you have made a mistake in the invoice. You have said that you have put some other customer's GST registration number and issued the invoice to. That also is an offense. Second one, you issue the invoice or bill without supply of goods or services or both in violation of the provisions of the Act or the rules made therein. That means this term refers to these fake invoices which keep circulating here and there. Now, just for the purpose of taking the input tax credit, a fake invoices keep getting issued by the taxpayers. Now, that is why the concept of e-invoicing has been now introduced. And slowly in the next couple of years, the government is going to cover the e-invoicing provision to pretty much all the registered taxpayers. Because that is the only way to combat the menace of these fake invoice problems which has been troubling our country all this while. Why do people issue a fake invoice? Why do you think people issue a fake invoice? What is the necessity for issuing the fake invoice? Can anyone tell me? Why do you think people get motivated to issue the fake invoice? Why do you think people get motivated to issue the fake invoice? Can anyone tell me? Is this applicable to bill of supply also? Yeah, this particular offense talks about invoice, but here bill of supply also will be definitely covered, but it comes under the other sections here. It is not specifically mentioned here. Here only invoice is covered. But wherever there is a general residuary provision which says that if anything which is not specified clearly, it is still covered, then it comes under the general offense. So therefore, if bill of supply is not specifically mentioned, it keeps coming under the general penalty. Yeah. So therefore, for getting the ITC, okay, correct. See, therefore, the main motivation, why do you think this always, I mean, it's very common. Everyone keep asking, bills hai kya? Are there any bills which is there? See, it has been a menace, and that is why the black money has been troubling our country for all this while. So therefore, when VAT was there, it was a huge problem, especially monitoring. Now that GST has come, since it is a centralized system in place, and also e-invoicing is there, to a lot of extent, the things are much, much better. I will tell you the reason why these fake invoices are that, popular. I should not say popular, but it's a very, very common occurrence. First reason, whenever any person at the end of financial year, somewhere in the month of February or March, he will suddenly realize that his sales are huge and his expenses are very less. Assuming his sale is around 10 crores, his expenses, purchases are only 5 crores. So 5 crores of profit. 5 crores profit pay, you have to pay so much of income tax. That is the first motivation. So what do you do to reduce the tax? You have to book expenses. How do you book expenses? You can't book expenses of 5 crores. Call that person. Sir, I want one bill. I will make the payment to you. And whatever it is, you return the cash some way or the other. This is the way in which things are done. So therefore, this bill gets claimed, his expenses get reduced, therefore profit gets reduced. That is why. Therefore, what is happening here? When I'm creating the expenses, I'm making the payment to him. He is giving the invoice, but is he actually supplying the goods or services to me? No, that is an offense under GST. So therefore, issuing the invoice or bill without the supply of goods or services or both in violation of the provisions of the act or thereunder is also an offense relating to invoice. Then issues any invoice or document by using the registered number of another registered person. Now I have one GST. My competitor, I am X limited, my competitor is Y limited. I issued the invoice. In the invoice, I mentioned the GST number of Y limited. That also is an offense under 122 subsection 1. I hope that is clear. It's a very simple offense. Fine. Now we look at the offenses relating to tax in evasion or relating to TDS or TCS. Come on, question time now. What do you mean by the term TDS under GST? And what do you mean by the term TCS under GST? I don't want answers like TDS means tax deducted at source, TDS means tax collected at source. That all of us know. What is the concept of TDS under GST? What is the concept of TCS under GST? In brief, 1-2 lines, whatever you know. See, because when I'm discussing the penalty, I need to be clear whether you're understanding what exactly is the TDS or TCS provision. In brief, at least. Only then I'll have clarity. Come on. Waiting for some answers. What do you mean by TDS or TCS under GST? ITC to reduce tax liabilities, it's common. Yes, it's definitely very common. Motive is to pay less tax. Yes. Input tax credit availed fraudulently. Correct. Avail and utilize input tax credit, increasing expenses. Very true. So therefore, the e-invoicing to a great extent has managed to reduce this. In the future, the government's target is to totally eliminate it. Tax deducted when payment is made is correct. But when does that happen? That is what I'm trying to ask you. TDS basic definition everyone knows. When you are making something, you deduct some tax, make that payment, the tax you pay to the government. That is very clear. But what is the TDS provision in GST? What we are talking about? Section 51 of the CGST Act 2017 is TDS. When does it applicable? Let's see how much of you have, how many of you remember that. TDS when person not registered and TCS when on specified goods transaction. Okay. Anyone else? TDS, Satish is close to. TDS is only for government contracts. Yes, Satish is close to the correct answer. So with specified government contracts, Section 51 is applicable. I don't want any of you Googling and seeing because then it doesn't make, I'm just asking you the question so that I evaluate the amount of knowledge. So that accordingly, I will tell you what exactly it means. So therefore now, TDS basically refers to Section 51, subsection 1 of the CGST Act, which talks about in case of certain, mostly government contractors, as Satish rightly pointed, where the agreement value is more than 2.5 lakhs, the TDS is supposed to be done at the rate of 1%. So therefore, this is what is given. So whenever the payment is to be made, TDS of 1% is supposed to be done. Okay, that is TDS. Now, what is TCS? TCS is tax collected at source. Tax collected at source. So when does this TCS comes into the picture? TCS comes with respect to e-commerce operators. That is, whenever the e-commerce operator is there, like Amazon or Flipkart or etc., if any person is making the supply of goods or services through such e-commerce operators, apart from the GST, okay, the e-commerce operator also collects tax at the rate of 1%. Collects tax at the rate of 1%. That is your TCS. I hope Section 51 and 52, please make a note. Please go through these provisions for you to have a more detailed understanding of what TDS and TCS is. So therefore, offenses relating to tax evasion, relating to TDS or TCS. So therefore, if I collect any amount as tax, I fail to pay the same to the government beyond a period of 3 months from the date on which the payment becomes due. See, when I collect the payment of tax, I should immediately pay. For that anyways, if it doesn't pay, interest is applicable, late fee is applicable, that will anyways come. But apart from that, if you don't pay within 3 months, it becomes an offense under 122 subsection 1. Then, collects any tax in contravention of the provision. See, first thing, legally you collect the tax, you don't pay till 3 months, that is an offense. Second one, you have collected the tax in contravention of the provisions of the act. That means you're not supposed to collect the tax, still you collected the tax and you didn't pay that same to the government beyond 3 months. That also is covered here. And fails to deduct the tax under the provisions of 51(1). That means you're supposed to deduct 1%, you didn't deduct, or you deducted 0.5% instead. You deduct less than the amount what is supposed to be deducted, and where he fails to pay the government the tax. So whatever you have not deducted or whatever you have short deducted, you fail to pay the government, that also is an offense. Then fails to collect the tax, this is TDS under 52 subsection 1, or you collect lesser amount of tax than what is required, or you don't collect any tax and obviously don't pay to the government. So this is basically the offenses relating to TDS or TCS. And also suppression of turnover. Suppression means what? Under disclosing. My turnover is 10 crores, but I'm showing only 5 crores. So I'm suppressing the turnover. Obviously, if I show a reduced turnover, the GST also what I'm supposed to pay will not be on the actual turnover, but it will be only on the reduced turnover. That is also an offense. I hope this is clear. Fine. Next question. Offenses relating to input tax credit. I know this question cannot be answered in very brief, but still, for the understanding, I will require, what do you mean by the term input tax credit under GST? Input tax credit under GST. What do you mean by that? Yes, TDS, TCS, most of you have got it. TCS applies to e-commerce operator, Satish. Yes. Geeta also supplied by Eco and YDR services also correct. But there also the TDS comes. Registration under TDS is mandatory. Of course, it is mandatory because they have to file a separate TCS return also in order so that the corresponding supplier gets the respective credit of tax. Now, anyone can tell me what is input tax credit? All of you need to answer this question. I mean, should know. If you're not answering also, it's fine. But you should know what exactly this is, because this is one critical, the heart of GST is nothing but input tax credit. The main reason why GST came into force is because of input tax credit and the facility of giving the input tax credit to the respective taxpayers. That is the main reason why, first of all, GST has come into existence. GST paid on inward supply, RCM paid is input tax credit. So therefore, section 17, 18 talks about input tax credit in detail. Please go through these provisions. Anyone who's not able to remember, input tax credit is basically whatever you pay on the purchase of the inputs, input services and capital goods. You can claim that as a credit and adjust it against the tax what you're collecting on your outward supply of goods or services. So what are the offenses related to input tax credit? Taking or utilizing ITC without actual receipt of goods or services, or both, either fully or partially, in contravention of the provisions of the act or rules made therein. That means one of the condition of claiming the input tax credit or utilizing the input tax credit is that you need to have actually received the goods or services. So if you are claiming the input tax credit without receiving the goods or services in contravention of the provisions of the act, that means it is you're doing an offense. Then takes or distributes input tax credit in contravention of section 20. 18, 19, 20, if you see, there is also a concept of input service distributor, ISD. So if there is an ISD, input service distributor, anyone can tell me what is an input service distributor? I'm sorry, I'm asking you many questions, but I have to know that you are able to distinguish it. ITC backbone, cascading effects, very good. Credit available on inputs, on purchase, on everything, Gita, even capital goods also, other than the block credits under 17 subsection 5. 17 subsection 5 of the CGST Act talks about the block credits or ineligible credits. Other than that, on all the other aspects, the input tax credit is allowed. GST on inward supply is okay. What is input service distributor? Input service distributor. Anyone? One PAN, multiple GST numbers. Okay. Okay, that is your part of it is correct. Anyone else? So therefore, if a company has multiple offices throughout the country, and it is incurring common expenses. Okay, head office usually is the input service distributor invariably. So head office is in Delhi, and various branches are located in Hyderabad, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc. 3-4 branches are there. Head office is in Delhi. The head office is getting into a contract with a broadband internet service provider for supply of internet through all the 4-5 offices. So single vendor is identified to whom the entire payment is made. Based on the turnover achieved in each particular region, the input tax what is being paid on the common expenses will be distributed based on the proportion of the turnover. This is your input service distribution. So therefore, here what is the procedure? The head office needs to take a separate registration under GST, which is called ISD registration, input service distributor registration, and he has to distribute the credit across all the branch offices in apportionment to the turnover achieved by the respective branch office. I hope this is clear. So therefore, in this case, what happens if he takes or distributes the input tax credit? So distribution is done in contravention. That is, you are not distributing the input tax credit in accordance to the rules which is given. That also is an offense. Then offenses relating to refund. Refund. When is refund applicable in GST? Section 54. I think it must have been covered as well. When is refund applicable in GST? Give me 1 or 2 instances where refund is applicable. 1 or 2 instances where refund is applicable. I hope everyone understood what is ISD concept. Input service distributor. Again, this is also covered in your input tax credit chapter. Okay. And now, can anyone tell me 1 or 2 instances where a refund can be claimed from the GST department? Export, very good. Inverted duty structure, very good. Yeah, good to see all of you know when the refund is collected. So therefore, whenever a dealer is export of goods or services, taxpayer is export of goods or services, whatever expenses he is incurring in the country, which he claims as an input tax credit, he can apply for the refund from tax, refund of the tax paid. Inverted duty structure also is there, wherein there is a huge variation between the GST what you're paying on the expenses and the GST which is applicable on the supply of your goods or services. Under inverted duty structure also, you can claim the respective refund. So fraudulently obtains refund. That means you're not supposed to claim the refund, but you claim the refund. You're claim the refund. I'll tell you an example here. Now, when you're an exporter of goods or services, it is a zero-rated supply only if you execute a letter of undertaking for that financial year. Online, you have to execute a letter of undertaking that you're an exporter of goods or services. Now, you did not execute a letter of undertaking and you tried to claim the input tax credit of the refund of the input tax credit. That is a fraudulent refund. And also inverted duty structure, you claim the goods what you are supplying are of one rate, but purposefully you showed the less rate and you tried to claim more refund from the government. That also is an offense relating to refund. Then offense relating to records, books, accounts, etc. Now, accounts, books and records are very important. You need to maintain your proper books of accounts. You need to maintain the documents correctly, invoices correctly, etc. So what are the offenses which are covered here? Falsifies or substitutes the records, producing fake accounts or documents, any false information or return, intention to evade payment of tax due. So in order to evade the payment of tax, you are replacing all your documents. You're producing all fake things. It is an offense. You are not, the next one is you have failed to retain the books of accounts in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Accounts and records, one chapter is there. You have to maintain the accounts as given in the GST law. Each you have to maintain a proper financial records, proper accounts have to be maintained, ledger has to be maintained. You have to do that. Okay. If you fail to do that, it's an offense. Then fails to furnish information or documents called for by an officer in accordance with the provisions or furnishes false information during proceedings. So if someone sends you a notice calling for information, you furnished false documents or you don't furnish the documents also, that is also an offense. So these are some other category of offenses. Offenses relating to registration. Again, this we have already discussed in the definition part. If you are liable to be registered, that means you have crossed the threshold of the turnover of 20 or 40 lakhs as may be applicable, but you did not obtain the registration. That is also an offense. And when you are applying for the registration, you furnished false information. That is, I'll give you an example. What many people do, because practically we keep seeing, right? So now what happens? Now, you are actually staying in a rented house. You don't own any house of yours. Okay. You don't own any business entity. I mean, you don't have any other address. You are staying in a rented house. Now, in this rented house, I want to get this address registered under GST. What my landlord is telling, my landlord or owner says, no, I will not. The rental agreement is with you, not with the business. This is supposed only for residential purposes, and it cannot be used for commercial purposes. Because the moment it is used for commercial purposes, the property tax varies. The property tax has to be paid more, and the electricity bill also varies. So therefore, in this particular situation, what people do, practically I'm seeing, they make a fake rental agreement. They make a fake rental agreement between the company and the owner, forge the signatures of the owner as well as the company, and apply for the GST registration. Practically, I've seen cases which are happening like that, which people at any cost, I want GST registration. I don't mind whatever has to be done. In connivance with the GST officer, also, sometimes even the departmental officers, very unfortunate, departmental officers also are aware of it. So therefore, in such situations, false information is being provided at the time of applying for the registration or later also. When I say later, once I apply for the GST registration, the provision is that you have to update the bank account details with the GST department within 30 days. So the bank account details which I'm updating also, I'm providing wrong details, right? So that also is an offense relating to registration. Then offenses relating to transportation or storage. Now, whenever the transport has to happen, an e-way bill, electronic way bill has to be generated, and it says that various documents needs to be enclosed for the purpose of this. So therefore, whenever the goods are transported without the cover of the documents, without documents, you are transporting the goods, or you are supplying, transporting, or storing the goods which he has reasons to believe are liable to confiscation under this act. Confiscation is a separate provision which we will discuss in our this topic only. So actually, the goods are liable for confiscation, but those confiscation, I'm storing it somewhere, or supplying it somewhere, or transporting it somewhere. That also is an offense. Fine. And there are some other residuary offenses, like when any officer or officer is there, when he's trying to, like for example, if you're transporting some goods from one place to the other, you have not generated an e-way bill. Officer is obstructing that vehicle, asking to produce the e-way bill. If you don't produce the e-way bill, he will seize the respective goods. You're preventing him. You're fighting with him. You're trying to hit him, and you want to ram the transport vehicle on him and giving him warnings. That is obstructing or preventing any officer in discharge of his duties, which is an offense. Tampers with or destroys any material evidence or document. Officer has an evidence. You came to know that he has an evidence. You are destroying that evidence without his knowledge or with his knowledge. Offense. Disposes of tampers any goods which have been detained, seized, attached. Detention, seizure we will discuss soon. So therefore, any goods which are seized or detained cannot be disposed or cannot be tampered. If you are doing that, it is an offense. Fine. So these are the various offenses which are covered under 122 subsection 1. Yes, zero rated supply, export, software business. Yes, software export business is an example of that. Now, UIN is separate. See, UIN refund is separate here, because here what happens is it talks about the GST registered numbers. If you look at the provision here, it talks about taxable person, registered person, or liable to be registered. Only those are covered here. Okay. If UIN refund is there, that will be covered under the general residuary penalty clause. Now, if you look at the section here, registered person, but not including any person having a unique identification number. So taxable person is covered here, registered or liable to be registered under section 24. So you are liable to be registered under section 24 if the UIN is covered. In case that will be covered, that refund also will be covered because it comes under taxable person. But if the UIN number recipient is not a taxable person, then he will not be covered here. So what is the penalties which is given for the various offences here under 122 subsection 1? Now please remember, CGST penalty, whatever is mentioned, same penalty will also be enforced under the SGST. So when I'm saying any amount under the CGST law, if I say 10,000 here, he has to pay 10,000 under CGST as well as 10,000 under the SGST. So therefore, 10,000 is the minimum threshold which is there, or amount equivalent to tax evaded, tax not deducted under 51 or short deducted, tax not collected, or input tax credit availed, refund claimed fraudulently, whichever is higher. So that exact amount, 10,000 or whatever the defraud has been done or whatever the revenue loss has been done, whichever is higher is to be created. Under IGST law, of course, it will be double because IGST is nothing but interstate supply. There is no question of division of rates there. So 20,000 or amount equivalent, whichever is higher. These are the quantum of penalty which is prescribed under 122 subsection 1. Fine. That is your 122 subsection 1. Now we come to the next provision, which is 122 subsection 1A, which talks about the levy of penalty on the taxable person or any other person who retains the benefit arising out of the offences or at whose instance such offences are conducted. Now you may be reading multiple news also, wherein they have arrested few CAs also who have assisted the taxpayer in making an offense, wherein the fake invoices are created by the CA himself. It's unfortunate, but some cases have been come to light where the CA Institute have given them disciplinary orders and debarred them from practicing. That all such news keep coming into the light. So, because this area is something wherein the greed takes over the integrity. People who are greedy will want to do all such things. So therefore, the greed takes over the integrity here. So what happens is 122 1A talks about the penalty on taxable person is anyways there, or any other person also who is getting benefit out of the offenses. One GST consultant is there, he's preparing a fake invoice and he's telling whatever your benefit you will share. The penalty can be levied on the GST consultant as well. That what this phrase means, or at whose instance such offences are conducted. This GST consultant only has suggested this idea to him. If you do this, that fellow will come. Sir, what to do? So much tax I am paying. How to reduce it? How to claim? How to reduce my GST amount? I don't have input tax credit. You do one thing. You get the bills from your person. We will claim the input tax credit without the supply of services. Because of that, you are benefiting some X amount of money. We will divide that between ourselves. This proposal this person is giving to the taxpayer. He is also covered here. So what are the invoices? What are the things which are covered here? Supply of goods without invoice or incorrect invoice, invoice without supply of goods or services, ITC taken without receipt of goods or services, irregular distribution. Therefore, it makes the beneficiary of the above transactions penalty similar to the penalty who is covered under subsection 1. So therefore, 122 subsection 1A levies the penalty also on the person at whose instance the offense has been committed. That is what is covered under 122 subsection 1A. So on him, quantum is penalty of an amount equivalent to tax evaded or ITC availed or passed on. That is your 122 1A. Now we come to 122 1B. E-commerce operator. Can anyone tell me who is an e-commerce operator? E-commerce operator. Earlier, when GST law first came into force, when the model GST law was there in 2017, the word aggregator was mentioned in place of e-commerce operator. Later, it was replaced by e-commerce operator. So, can anyone tell me what is an who is an e-commerce operator? Who is an e-commerce operator? Waiting for some answers. Question time. So, who is an e-commerce operator under GST? Give some examples also, as per your for goods and services for both you give. Okay, I'll keep continuing and meanwhile look at the responses. So therefore, e-commerce operator as such is a person who uses an electronic platform or uses a mobile application for the purpose of supplying the respective goods or services. So this can be of two types. One, he can build the app or the platform so that he can supply the goods or services on his own, or he can also run a platform where he takes the goods or services from everyone, and he can list it on his application or electronic platform and supply the goods. So therefore, one of the rule here is that whenever an e-commerce operator is taking other suppliers on his application, let us take an example of, say, Swiggy here. Swiggy is onboarding some restaurants on its platform so that you order the food from Swiggy, from that particular restaurant. The basic criteria is that the restaurant which is tying up with Swiggy needs to be registered under GST. Now, if Swiggy is onboarding a restaurant which does not have GST registration, that means it will be subject to penalty under 122(1)(b). What is the amount mentioned? 10,000 or amount equivalent to amount of tax involved had such supply been made by a registered person other than composition supplier. That means what? Whatever, if an unregistered person is tying up with Swiggy, okay, and whatever tax is to be collected is not being paid to the department. In that particular situation, whatever would have been paid, that amount or 10,000, whichever is higher. Okay, so where he permits supply by an unregistered person, but however, some notified persons and some persons are exempt from the registration, those are there. Apart from that, who allows unregistered person to be on the part of his platform or allows interstate supply through it by a person not so eligible. If you're doing interstate supply, you have to get yourself registered under GST. So electronic commerce operator is there. He's onboarding a supplier who is located in Tamil Nadu and he's making a sale to a person located in Hyderabad. He's not supposed to do that because interstate supply means you need to have compulsory registration, right? Or fails to furnish the correct details in form GSTR 8 with respect to outward supply of goods through it by a person exempted from registration under CGST Act. What is GSTR 8? GSTR 8 talks about if any person who is exempt from registration, like for example, pharmacy shop is there. Pharmacy shop is tied up with, say, Apollo Health Online is an app, or it can be some Pharma Easy or something is there. So most of the cases they supply only medicines. They are not subject to GST, assuming they are supplying only exempt medicines. The rule is in GSTR 8, the e-commerce operator has to submit the details of the supply what has been made by a person who is exempt from registration. If he does not, if he fails to furnish the correct details on that also, the penalty will be levied. So I hope this section is clear. 122(1)(b). E-commerce, Swiggy, Ola, etc. Transaction. Who owns or manage digital platform for conducting e-commerce transaction? Correct. Electronic platform. Yes. Yeah. E-commerce point. I like once again cover that. Yeah, the same thing. See, very simple. First of all, let me give you an example here. Here, one is a e-commerce. Let me take an example. Okay, say XYZ Biryani House. Okay, ties up with Swiggy. They do not have registration. Okay, ideally Swiggy can onboard this XYZ Biryani House only if he has GST registration. Swiggy onboards XYZ Biryani House and collects GST from customer. So here what is happening? Unregistered dealer cannot come first of all in Swiggy. He has to get registered under GST, only then he can come. If he collects GST from the customer, okay, now there are two aspects to it. In some cases, The e-commerce operator will directly pay the tax to the government. Then there is no problem. There is no revenue loss. Only general penalty of 10,000 will come because tax is already going to the government. Okay. So in this case, Swiggy pays GST directly to government. Therefore, no revenue loss to the government. Fine. This is one one. Now, second one. Now there is Swiggy Instamart as well. Okay. Instamart is there. Ties up with grocery store. Okay. Supplies products. Now, Instamart also, one, Swiggy itself has the warehouse. In few cases, they tie up with the local respective supermarkets here. So I'm talking about the second case where here what is happening? Unregistered supermarket onboarded on Swiggy, liable to penalty. Because in this case, the unregistered person, first of all, is not supposed to come there. And he is supposed to pay the GST directly to the government. Since he doesn't pay the GST, it is a revenue loss. So in this case, there is a revenue loss. So therefore, here what is happening? The tax does not go to the government or 10,000, whichever is higher. Fine. So therefore, e-commerce operator, again, it's an ocean because the kind of amendments which has happened over the last few months and the last 1 year has made it one of the very tricky provisions. So you have to look at the provisions in detail. A lot of amendments also has happened. Earlier, restaurants in Swiggy and Zomato, what they used to do, they used to collect the tax and pay to the department. Now what is happening? The responsibility is given to Swiggy to collect and pay the GST directly to the GST department. Fine. So these are some of the aspects under section 122 1B. Any doubts? Any further doubts? I hope, Namrata, you understood. Yes, sorry about making you hungry. What to do when the clock starts, when you are a CS. When I was a CS student, I obviously, like every one of us or most of us, put on a lot of weight, wherein we need that for the stress to overcome. We need that biryani and that thumbs up, or that combination is very famous in Hyderabad. Biryani and thumbs up has to be there. Of course, at that time, it was very unfortunate or fortunate that there was no Swiggy where I could order whenever I want. But obviously, I'm sorry to make you hungry, but I wish you have a good bowl of biryani after the class. Now we come to the next one. Penalty under section 122 subsection 2. Any registered person who supplies any goods or services or both on which tax has not been paid or short paid or erroneously refunded, or where input tax credit has been wrongly availed or utilized, in this case, what is happening? The main section, what is covered under 122 subsection 2 is whether there is a presence of fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade the tax, or whether there is no such reason. Please remember, 122, the 21 offenses which are covered there, that is separate. And here there is separate. Here it talks about the registered person who supplies. The earlier provision spoke about taxable person, but this one speaks about the registered person. That is the fundamental difference between the two provisions. So therefore, if a registered person, he is supplying the goods or services on which the tax he has not paid, or he has short paid the tax or erroneously refunded, or where ITC is wrongly availed or utilized, in that case, what happens? Two things are there. For reason other than fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts. What do you mean by the term fraud? I think everyone knows what is fraud. Willful misstatement means purposefully you are telling something wrong. Purposefully you are not disclosing something, or purposefully you are disclosing some wrong thing. That is willful misstatement. Or suppression of facts. You are under disclosing your turnover. That is a suppression of fact with the intention to evade the tax. In that case, penalty will be 10,000 or 10% of the tax due from such person. Please be very careful here. 10,000 or 10% of the tax due from such person, whichever is higher. Now, this is in addition to the respective tax what you are supposed to pay with interest. That is covered under section 50. Interest is covered under section 50. So apart from that, 10,000 or 10% of tax due, whichever is higher, for reason other than reason. So this provision in this case, this fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts is not applicable. That means he has done these offenses, but the presence of this FWS, remember the acronym FWS, fraud, willful misstatement, suppression of facts. These three are absent. Other than any other reason he has done apart from these three, then this is the penalty for these things what he has done. But wherever there is fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts, then what is happening? In this case, amount equal to 10,000 or entire tax amount, whichever is higher. Please note the difference. First one is where there is no FWS, it is 10,000 or 10% of tax due, whichever is higher. Where there is FWS, then it is 10,000 or the entire tax due, whichever is higher. I hope you got the point. Wrong shown, not shown. I didn't understand, Amrita. Can you clarify what you said here? Oh, please be careful if you are on the bus stop. Yeah, I didn't understand this query. Amrita, if you can just substantiate further. Yeah, so in this case, basically, if there is fraud, willful misstatement or suppression, in that case, the penalty will be higher. This is your 122 subsection 2. Fine. That is what is covered under 122 subsection 2. Now we come to 122 subsection 3. Here, this levies the penalty on any person who commits any of the below offenses. 122 subsection 3. Also, a person is liable to penalty if he aids or abets any of the 21 offenses. Now, apart from the person at whose instance the offense is committed, that is one part of the story. The second thing is you are taking the help of someone. Now, for making a fake bill, you are deputing few persons who are doing it. Like the worst example what I can give here is the CA who actually is doing it is deputed as article trainee to prepare fake invoices. I'm hoping no one has done this, but in case you have done it, it's very, very bad. But here, if something like that happens, even the person who is making the fake invoices at the instance of his boss, because he's not aware, the person consultant will tell you just make one fake invoice. He'll make the invoice. Therefore, he is also aiding or abetting the offense which is there under 122 subsection 1. So therefore, in this particular situation also, if he 122 subsection 3 gives various cases where the penalty is levied on any person. Again, here if you see, there is no taxable person or there is no registered person here. It refers to any person. So it can be anyone. So therefore, it can be anyone here. So what all are there? First one is any person is there who is supporting the commission of these 21 offenses. He is also covered. Acquiring possession or transporting, removing, etc. Rebuild where he has reasons to believe are liable for confiscation. Okay. Same thing, but only difference here is any person who is assisting is also covered here. Receives or is anyway concerned with the supply, the reasons to believe they are in contravention. Fails to appear before the officer of central tax. Sometimes the commissioner will issue summons. When a summons is a very, very serious provision in any law for that matter. If he issues a summons asking the respective person to come to his office and given a written statement, if you don't appear on that respective date, that means that is also an offense. Then fails to issue the invoice in accordance with the provisions or fails to account for the invoice in the books of accounts are covered. Again, in this particular case, 122 subsection 3, penalty is leviable for an amount which extend up to 25,000. So please bear in mind, these penalties are in addition to the penalties what are given under the previous subsections what we have discussed. Fine. I hope this is clear. So these were your respective penalties under subsection 122, subsection 3. And now we come to, there is another subsection, there is section 123 which talks about penalty for failure to furnish information return, that has already been covered in module number 2 in the returns topic. So that section we are skipping. So therefore now we come to 124, fine for failure to furnish statistics. Fine for failure to furnish statistics. So here what happens? Now 151 is the section what is covered here. 151. So any idea what is 151? I'm not sure. 151 is already covered for you. So therefore, in this particular case, we have to go to section 151. So 151 basically what does it mean? It says that the commissioner may direct any person to give any information what he wants. Now, for example, I am the GST commissioner. Now, I have seen in the respective taxpayer's GST returns that he has claimed some input tax credit, which I feel I have a doubt whether it is genuine or not. The invoice mentions the name of another registered person. So I, as a commissioner, have the power to issue a notice to that other person to give the clarification with regard to this. The similar type of provision is there in income tax also in section 133(6) of the Income Tax Act 1961. So therefore, the notice can be given to some other XYZ person also. Not necessarily always the taxpayer, but if any third party registered person is there, the notice can also be given to that particular person to furnish some information. This power can be exercised by the commissioner under section 151. So commissioner issues the notice under 151 to that other third party person. If he fails to furnish such information or return without reasonable cause, or he furnishes false information, he shall be punishable up to fine up to 10,000 rupees. But in case continuing offense, that means after paying the penalty, again is submitting false information, further fine which may extend up to 100 per day, after during which the offense continues, or 25,000, whichever is lower. This is 124, failure to furnish statistics by a third person whenever the notice is issued under 151 of the CGST Act 2017. Fine. So that was your section 124. 125 talks about the general penalty. General penalty is nothing but the residuary penalty, that is where no penalty is separately provided under the Act, but you have made a contravention of the provisions. You cannot escape saying that I didn't know it was an offense because you are not covered in 122 to 124. So therefore, I did not, I didn't know. Had I known it was covered, I would not have done. That is not. To escape such situations, the government has also given that any person who is contravening the provisions of the Act for which separate penalty is not provided, he shall be liable to penalty which may extend up to rupees 25,000. Again, this penalty amount is discretionary in nature. Okay. It is up to 25,000. It is not fixed at 25,000. What is the nature of offense? Whether it is major, whether it is very severe, these factors decide what is the amount of provision. Just because he made a minor contravention, it cannot say 25,000. Gravity of the offenses has to be considered. General disciplines relating to penalty should be considered by the of 126 talks about the various principles of natural justice or disciplines what you have to follow when you are imposing the penalty under section 125. That is incidentally what our next topic what we have discussed is 126, which talks about the general disciplines while levying the penalty. Now, just as it is very important for the department officer or the tax officer to issue the notice whenever he feels that the taxpayer has committed an offense and is eligible for the penalty, in the same way, the officer also, the respective tax officer also, just because he has the power, he should not abuse the power. For that, this 126 provision is given. Therefore, what are the things the officer has to be kept in mind whenever the levy of penalty is to be levied is covered under 126. Principles of natural justice, principles governing international trade and agreements, which is based on jurisprudence. That is various case laws what are there in the Indian legal domain. Principles of natural justice, always opportunity of hurt to be given. You straight away, just because you have a suspicion, you cannot walk into your respective taxpayer's shop or place of business and ask him to pay the penalty. You have to give an opportunity of being heard. So therefore, these are the provisions which are given. So no penalty shall be imposed for minor breaches of tax regulations or procedural requirements of the law. See, sometimes very small mistakes will be committed. Like everyone is supposed to hang a copy of the GST registration certificate at the office premises. Now, instead of hanging it outside at a prominent place, he kept it inside in another room. That is a very procedural requirement is not being followed. Simply for this, you cannot issue the penalty. Any omission or mistake which is easily rectifiable. Invoice number, you made one mistake. Instead of putting 015, you put 15. You've just forgot 10. Can easily rectifiable. There is no fraudulent intention or gross negligence. Okay. So therefore, in this particular situation, also minor breach is always when the amount is less than 5,000, and easily rectifiable means you can openly see that there is an error on the document. It can be rectified. So therefore, for minor breaches or tax regulations, penalty cannot be levied where the tax impact is less than 5,000 rupees. Again, penalty should always depend on the facts and circumstances. Whatever is the degree of the breach, degree severeness of the severity of the offense, that is what is important. Another important, most important point. Without giving an opportunity of being heard, you cannot levy any penalty on any particular person. Opportunity of being heard is a must. Only then the respective penalty can be levied. You have to give him an opportunity of being heard. He has to represent his case to you. Only when you are satisfied that still he has committed an offense, only then you issue a order of penalty. And also, whenever he is issuing the penalty, you have to give the respective section, applicable law, regulation, procedure where the breach has been specified. You have to clearly give this. Okay, only then you can the respective penalty can be levied. Where a person voluntarily discloses to the officer circumstances of the breach of the law, regulation, etc., he will consider the fact as a mitigating factor. Now, what happens sometimes? The what offense what that person has committed has not come to the light of the officer. The person himself comes and says that I have violated this regulation. You have not yet noticed this, but I want to admit that fact and I want to pay the respective tax. So when I'm calculating the penalty, the officer will consider this as a positive aspect. Mitigating factor means positive factor that okay, this respective taxpayer has accepted that he has made a mistake and committed an offense, and therefore to that extent I will reduce the penalty. He shall consider that as a mitigating factor. Okay, so these provisions 126 will not apply where the penalty is given as a fixed sum or a fixed percentage. Now 125 talks about general penalty up to 25,000. So therefore fixed sum or fixed percentage is not mentioned. Only then 126 will get triggered. So therefore general disciplines will be considered only when there is no proper fixed amount or fixed percentage not given. Let's try to answer this question. Mr. X, an unregistered person under GST, purchases the goods supplied by Mr. Y, who is a registered person, without receiving a tax invoice from Mr. Y. Thus, helps in the tax evasion by Mr. Y. A disciplinary action is taken under Mr. X. Ad hoc penalty of 20,000 is imposed by passing an order without describing contravention for which penalty is to be imposed, without mentioning the provisions under which. Should X proceed to pay a penalty or challenge the order given by the government? Can you answer this question? Unregistered person purchases the goods supplied by Y, is a registered person. Tax invoice is not received from Mr. Y. Therefore, because of that, he is helping in the tax evasion of Mr. Y. Disciplinary action is taken against X. An ad hoc penalty is straight away issued. Can anyone answer whether he should proceed to pay the penalty or challenge the order given by the government? Anyone? Yes. So if you see here, this basically is covered wherein the person is aiding or abetting the offense. Or so in that case, their fixed sum is not mentioned. So therefore, general principles under 126 will get triggered. So therefore, he has not given him an opportunity of being heard. He has not given the provisions where the penalty is levied. He is straight away levying penalty of 20%. So therefore, in this case, since the general disciplines which are given under section 126 is not being followed, Mr. X need not pay the penalty and is well within rights to challenge the order which is passed by the department. Fine. So the next one is the power to impose penalty in certain cases. Now, wherever the penalty is not covered, the proper officer can still impose the penalty. Under the following proceedings, if the penalty is not covered, he can still impose the penalty. What are the cases? Assessment of non-filer of returns under 62, assessment of unregistered persons under 63. And these sections basically talks about the late fees, the respective recoveries, the demands which have to be made applicable to non-filers of returns, unregistered persons. Multiple cases are given. So therefore, this section, what it does, 127, that even though the penalty is not covered under the following proceedings, still he can impose the penalty. Okay, these are all the various aspects that are covered. So therefore, the proper officer, if he feels that whatever under these respective sections, 62, 63, 64, 73, 74, 129, 130, 129, 130 we will cover here. I'm assuming the earlier sections are already covered. So in these particular situations where the particular separate provisions of penalty are not given there, but the proper officer still has the power to impose the penalty if he feels it is a just cause. So therefore, if he feels that the above respective persons are liable to penalty, he can issue the order levying the penalty. But again, a reasonable opportunity of being heard has to be given to the respective person. So that is your 127. 128 is another simple provision which talks about power to waive off the penalty or fee or both. So you can either waive the penalty, waive the fee or both. So whatever sections are given under 122, 123, 125 or even late fee, the government by notification can waive off under mitigating circumstances. Sometimes the GST website does not work properly, or sometimes the in cases like COVID-19, etc. At that point of time, the government issued the waiving off of penalties or late fees in various cases. So therefore, section 128 of the CGST Act gives the power to the respective government. Now we come to 129, which talks about detention, seizure, and release of goods and conveyances in transit. So therefore, this particular section speaks about detention. Detention means the officer will hold the goods and not allow you to do anything with it. Seizure of goods means he feels that you're not supposed to have the goods and take it from your possession. We'll also discuss the difference between the seizure and detention. Conveyance, that is the transport vehicle which is covering such goods. Apart from the goods, he can also seize or detain the respective transport vehicle and also the document. So these all will be covered in section 129, what we will discuss. Section 125 says any person contravenes Mr. X proceed to pay can't challenge. One second, let us go to 125 here. Any person who contravenes, correct. Any person who contravenes any provisions of the Act for which no penalty is provided. So what is the query here? 125 says any person contravenes Mr. X proceed to pay can't challenge. I didn't understand, Satish, what you are telling here. See, this question, whatever is given, that penalty is not 125 provision. If you look to the previous sections which are covered, I'll just take you back a bit. I'll tell you the exact section here. A person is liable where he aids or abets any of the 21 offenses. So therefore, the test question what we discussed is not 125. It is 102, 122 subsection 3, where that person, the recipient, unregistered person, is helping the commission of the offense. Here also, if you see, fixed sum is not mentioned. 126 will come to all the sections wherever the fixed sum is not mentioned. I hope that is clear. Okay, this provision may appear a bit tricky, but don't worry, it's not a very complicated provision. If you are familiar with all these sections, 62, 63, 64, basically each section has a late fee, interest, or some amount of uh, penalty which can be levied. So therefore, this 127 is very clear. Wherever the penalty is not covered, still the proper officer can impose the respective penalty. That is what it says. Any further queries? Viraj, can you tell me where exactly, if you're not following, I can cover that once again. Don't worry, it's a very straightforward topic. Sometimes where other sections are being mentioned, you may become a bit confused and it becomes a bit tricky. But don't worry, it's fairly simple. So please let me know wherever you feel there is a difficulty in understanding. We have time and we can also cover that particular section once again. There is no problem at all. Okay, so guys, let's take a short break here for 10 minutes, and post the break, we shall continue the topic of 129, which talks about seizure and detention of the conveyances, the transport vehicles, documents, etc. We shall also look at various other provisions which relates to offenses and penalties. We shall also cover the topic of compounding of offenses as well. Meanwhile, till now, whatever we discussed, if you have any queries, please feel free to keep putting in the query link. I'll see you in the after the next 10 minutes. Thank you. Can we start? Okay. Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Hope you uh, hope some of you didn't have biryani in the 10 minutes of break. Please have it after the class gets over. Yeah. Now we come to the this was the provision of waiving the penalty. Now we come to the provision of section 129 of the CGST Act 2017, which talks about detention, seizure, release of goods and conveyances in transit. So what does 129 subsection 1 provide here? What do you mean by the term detention? Detention, detaining something, that is holding on to something. Okay, holding on to something is detention. Seizure is, that means taking possession of that something and not giving it back to that respective person. It is totally the property of the person who is seizing it. That is seizure. Okay, of goods, conveyance, or documents. So therefore, if any person transports the goods or stores any goods when they are in transit in contravention of the provisions of the GST law, whenever you are storing the goods or whenever you are transporting the goods, multiple things have to be taken into consideration. Especially in transport, the general issuance of the e-way bill is there. If you transport without issuance of the e-way bill, or you're transporting without the invoice, you're storing the goods which are liable for confiscation. In this particular situation, 129(1) says all such goods and conveyance means the transport vehicle which is used as a means of the transport for carrying the said goods, and also the documents relating to such goods and conveyance. So even the vehicle documents shall be liable to detention or seizure. So therefore, it covers the situations where the goods are being transported or stored without the documents, or supplies the goods which have not been recorded in the books of accounts maintained by him. So these are the situations which are covered here where the detention or seizure can come into existence. So therefore, it is very important for us to understand what is the difference between seizure and detention. Detention speaks about denial of access. That means when I'm detaining the goods, I will not allow the owner of the goods to access the goods. It will be with me only, but I don't have ownership over it. I will just keep it with me till whatever offense is committed is proved, right? Detaining the goods. I will not give access to that person. I will just have it with me. That is detention. What is seizure? Seizure is taking over the goods. That means the goods, whatever is there, I feel will no longer be in possession of the dealer because the offense has been committed and it's a serious offense. So therefore, I will seize the goods. I will take over the goods into my possession. When I say I here, it refers to the GST department. So the GST department will take over the respective goods. When will detention come and when will seizure come is very important. Detention will come only when there is a suspicion that the goods are liable for confiscation. It is not yet proven, but I have a doubt that these goods should not be transported and it shall be confiscated by me. If I have a doubt or suspicion, then I can detain the goods. But I can do the seizure only when there is a reasonable belief. That is, there is a reasonable belief means there is a proper proof, that there is conclusive evidence, there has been a thorough inquiry or investigation, and it has come to light the goods are liable for confiscation. Only in that particular situation, the seizure can be made. That is the distinction between detention and seizure. Another important point is, again, without serving an order, you have to give an order of detention on seizure on the person who is transporting the goods. No goods or conveyance shall be detained or seized without giving an order to the person who is transporting the goods. So that is basically the distinction between detention and seizure. Now, how the penalty is calculated in this particular situation? After the detention or seizure, The goods, conveyance or document shall be released on payment of a specified penalty. Now, there are two instances here which we have to understand. Now, it is definitely a major inconvenience for any taxpayer or any dealer for that matter, in case his goods are taken away from his control. Now, whether it is detained or whether it is seized, ultimately it is taken away from him at the end of the day. So therefore, it causes a lot of tension to him and it causes a lot of panic to him also. So there is always a chance where the owner of the respective goods, from his side itself, he will come forward for the payment of penalty. He will say that I don't want to argue with you. I agree with you. I will go ahead and pay. I will come forward myself and I will pay the respective penalty. So therefore, two cases are covered here, where the owner himself comes forwards and pay the penalty, and second case where the owner does not come forward and pay the penalty. I hope all of you are following this point. So therefore, here there are two categories which are given. One is taxable goods, one is exempt goods. Because exempt goods also, in some cases for exempt goods also, the e-waybill documentation has to be there. There also he can seize or detain the exempt goods as well. There is no specific relaxation for exempt goods here. So for taxable goods, where the owner of the goods himself comes forward for payment of penalty, in that particular situation, the penalty will be 200% of the tax payable. Okay, you come forward yourself and pay the tax. It is 200% of the tax payable for taxable goods. For exempted goods, it is lower of the following: 2% of the value of goods or 25,000, whichever is lesser. This is the penalty in case the owner himself comes forward for the payment of the penalty. Second case, where the owner does not come forward for the payment of the penalty. Then what is the situation? The goods conveyance documents will be released. What is the penalty which has to be paid for taxable goods? Penalty equal to higher of the following: 50% of value of the goods, not tax. The previous case, if you see, where he comes forward, it is straight away equal to 200% of tax payable. But here what he is telling, he is getting another angle into the picture. He is telling 50% of the value of the goods. So here tax is not covered. Please note, here tax is not covered. Here value of goods only is covered. 50% of the value of the goods or 200% of the tax payable, whichever is higher, that penalty has to be paid in case that person does not come forward by himself. But he still wants to release, but he's telling no, he's arguing or doing whatever. Then I will still release, but since he did not come forward, he has to pay this amount of penalty. For exempt, it is slightly increased. In the previous case, it was 2% of the value of the goods. Here it is made 5% of the value of the goods or 25,000, whichever is lesser. Fine. These are the penalties which are given under 129, wherein the detained or seized goods will be released on the payment of a specified amount of penalty. What is the amount of penalty which is specified, which is supposed to be paid? There are two instances here. One where he himself comes forward to pay the tax and penalty. So he himself comes forward for paying the penalty. And the second case where he does not come forward to pay the penalty. These two cases are covered here. Any queries in this particular aspect what we have discussed, please let me know. Then 129 subsection 3 and 129 subsection 4 speaks about issuance of notice as well as passing of order for the payment of penalty. So therefore, if you see here, again, issuing notice is very, very important, and order also has to be given. And before you calculate the penalty, principles of natural justice has to be followed. The respective person needs to be given an opportunity of being heard. Opportunity of being heard has to be given. Only then the respective penalty can be paid. So these timelines you just have to remember. All these are rules wherein you may get sort of confused, but the steps you have to remember very clearly. Here what happens, whenever the detention or seizure is done within 7 days, whenever the detention or seizure is done within 7 days, he shall issue a notice. In that notice, he will specify the penalty amount which is payable. Okay, in the notice, he will specify the penalty amount which is payable. After he serves the notice, within a period of 7 days, he will pass an order. he will pass an order for the payment of the penalty. Time limit of 7 days each shall be prescribed for issue of notice and passing of order for the payment of penalty. Opportunity of being heard shall be given to the person concerned before determining the penalty payable. Again, now here only when he determines the penalty, when in this case where he says that he will issue a notice within 7 days, here when that owner comes forward to pay the penalty, accordingly in the order, he will take the provisions where the reduced penalty is given. But if he does not come forward to pay the penalty, he will put the increased amount of penalty and pass the order. Okay, so passing of order has to be given and opportunity of being heard has to be given to the respective taxpayer. That is what is given as a procedure. That is 129.3 and 129.4. 129.5 talks about conclusion of proceedings on payment of penalty payable. Very simple. The moment the respective penalty is paid, the notice issued shall be deemed to be concluded. There is no further action to be taken. He has paid the respective penalty. Now, the second case, what happens when the penalty amount itself is not paid? 129 subsection 6. I hope everyone is getting the clarity. First step, the goods, conveyance or documents will be detained or seized. Number 2, within 7 days, he has to issue a notice saying that he has to pay the respective amount of penalty. Then third one, after giving an opportunity of being heard to the taxpayer, he will pass an order. Again, within 7 days, that specified amount of penalty needs to be paid. Third step. In this third step, if the owner says, yes, I will pay the penalty, matter is over, proceedings are concluded. The second case, what happens here is, if he says that no, I will not pay the penalty, what happens? That is what is covered under 129 subsection 6. So where the person transporting the goods or owner does not pay the penalty within 15 days of date of receipt. So whenever the penalty order is given, within 15 days from the receipt of the penalty order, if he does not pay the specified amount, then what is happening? Very serious provision here. Goods or conveyance which is detained or seized shall be liable to be sold. The goods or conveyance which is detained or seized by the respective department shall be liable to be sold or otherwise in the prescribed time to recover the penalty so payable. I hope you got the point. He will straight away go and sell. Sometimes what will happen? The goods which are detained or seized are perishable or hazardous in nature or will has lot of depreciation. In that particular situation, what will happen? This 15 days time will be reduced by the proper officer. Okay, here what will happen? Because 15 days I cannot keep those goods because it will get spoiled. Because the nature of goods are such, the shelf life of those goods are very less. Then what happens? 15 days time limit, he can reduce it just because he can sell the respective goods and recover the penalty amount. Fine. Here also, the transporter is given a benefit because if the goods are liable to confiscation, the person who is transporting is again given an option saying that forget about the goods. The transporter can get the conveyance released here for payment of penalty under subsection 3. So whatever subsection 3 penalty is there, the transporter pays that penalty, at least the conveyance will be released and then or rupees 1 lakh and 1 lakh, whichever is less. So therefore 1 lakh or 129.3, whichever is less, if the transporter pays, he can get the conveyance released. Okay, he can get the conveyance released. So this is basically the provision which is given. There is no provision which is given for sale of conveyance or disposal of conveyance here. Conveyance will be detained, that's all. If you want the vehicle back, you pay the respective penalty or rupees 1 lakh, whichever is less. I hope you got the flow of the events under 129. Okay, if you have any queries, please feel free to ask me. I hope all of you got the respective flow right from seizure or detention of the goods, issuance of the notice, opportunity of being heard given to the respective owner of the goods, then passing of the penalty order. Then after the penalty order is passed, within 15 days, if he pays, well and good. If he doesn't pay, he will dispose the goods within 15 days and try to recover the penalty. In the meantime, if conveyance needs to be released, the transporter can apply. He will either pay the penalty or rupees 1 lakh, whichever is less, and he can get the conveyance released on that particular payment. Fine. So I hope this point is clear for you. Now we come to the procedure. This is just a procedure here. Whenever the inspection of goods has to be done, how shall the proper officer intercept and inspect the goods? That is what is covered here. Here, any proper officer can anytime intercept or inspect the vehicle for verification of the documents. Whenever the interception happens, the person, just like however anyone stops you, like a traffic police stops you and asks you to provide the respective documents. Whenever a transport vehicle is going through the city, any proper officer can stop the vehicle and ask you to furnish the documents. Very, very simple. So on being intercepted, the person, whoever is in charge of the conveyance or the vehicle, shall produce the respective documents. The proper officer will verify the documents. No discrepancies are there means conveyance will be allowed to move forward. Where documents are not provided or where inspection is undertaken, he will record a statement. Proper officer will record a statement from the vehicle in charge. Order shall be given for physical verification or inspection of the conveyance, requiring the person to station the conveyance, allow the inspection of the goods. Just a procedure for how to do the inspection and interception. Then the inspection shall be concluded within a period of 3 days. So whenever order of issue of inspection is given, within 3 days, he has to conclude the inspection proceedings. Once the proceedings or verification is completed, he will prepare a report of the verification, upload the report on the common GST portal, and also give a copy of the report to the person in charge. No discrepancies are there. Very simple. Release order will be given. Allow the conveyance to move further. Where it is opinion, need to be detained under 129 order of detention. And then the entire process, what we have seen under 129 earlier now, the same thing will apply. This particular procedure is only given as to how the proper officer, what powers he has to intercept and inspect, and what is the timeline given to him for completing the inspection is what is given in the respective procedure. This is the same thing. Whenever here, if it does not, he will be released. Transporting the goods fails to pay the penalty. The goods or conveyance or detained shall be liable to be sold or disposed of otherwise. There is a small variation in the procedure here. In the procedure, he is also giving the power to dispose the conveyance. So therefore, in the worst case scenario, where the person is not coming to take his conveyance also, he's telling, I'm not bothered about the vehicle. Very rare situation. Usually what happens, the transporter will come because the value of the vehicle will be in lakhs. So usually he will want, at least you give my vehicle, you seize the goods and give the vehicle. So he will somehow get the vehicle released. Now the worst case scenario, the transport operator is not bothered about his vehicle also. The worst case scenario, in the procedure, the power has also been given for the conveyance, whatever it is detained, that also can be sold in order to recover the penalty. Fine. Are things clear? Any queries here? Procedural stuff which is given in 129, which talks about the detention, seizure, release. Now, what are the cases where detention or seizure may not be initiated? Now, what had happened is, the moment this particular provision came, all the officers, whoever are stopping the vehicles and asking to produce the documents, so most of the time there's only the driver which is there and a particular manager who's looking after the products. They may not be very knowledgeable in giving the respective documents. So simply they used to detain and seize the vehicle and cause inconvenience. So that is why what has happened is the government has given certain cases where the detention or seizure may not be initiated. What are the respective things? Very, very minor things, normal in these particular situations. But again, the prerequisite is there. Here, what should be there? The invoice has to be there. Other specified documents should be there. And also e-way bill has to be there. These are the 3 prerequisites. Invoice, specified document, e-way bill. These 3 have to be there. Then in that situation, the 129 proceedings, that is the detention seizure proceedings, will not be initiated in the following situations. Please remember, if it should not be initiated, the prerequisite is you need to have an invoice in place and you also need to have an e-way bill in place. That is crystal clear. Invoice or any other specified document, it says. Someone asked whether bill of supply is covered. Any other specified document can also refer to bill of supply. Because for exempt goods or goods under composition scheme, it is bill of supply. So invoice or specified document as well as e-way bill has to be there. Then the seizure detention need not be there in the following cases. Small spelling mistakes are there in the name of the supplier and the recipient. but GST number is correct. Wherever applicable, GST number is correct, but on the document, mistake is there on the names of the consignor and the consignee. PIN code error is wrong. Error is the PIN code, but address is correct. Error is correct, but again, an important, very interesting point here. The condition that error in the PIN code should not have effect of increasing the validity period of the e-way. So if there is a, say in 6 lakh 96, 6 lakh 69, 6 lakh 95 will be somewhere close by. So it's fine. But instead of 6 lakh 96, if you put 5 lakh 96, a different state altogether. So validity of the e-way bill becomes increased. In the e-way bill, to some extent, up to 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, more than that, the validity is for 3 days or 7 days, etc. That validity should not change. Small error in the PIN code, fine. Then error in address of the consignee, to the extent that locality and all are correct, but all details are correct, small variations are there. 1 or 2 digits of the document number, there is an error. There is a typographical error. Okay. Error in 4 or 6 digit level of HSN, where first 2 digits are correct, rate of tax mentioned is correct. First 2 digits of HSN, HSN usually is of 4 digits. First 2 digits is the general category. The third and fourth digits are the specific category of goods which are there. HSN code. Can anyone tell me what is HSN code? I've in fact told the term before the break also at one point. I forgot to ask you. I need to know whether you guys know what is a HSN code. What is the full form of HSN? I know they'll never ask you this question, but what is the full form of HSN? Anyone know that? Can anyone tell me what is HSN code, or at least what is the full form of HSN and why it is relevant in the GST law? So therefore, in this case, HSN 2 digits are correct. 3 and 4, there's a mistake. Rate of tax also is correct. Error in 1 or 2 digits or characters of the vehicle number. So they're all minor errors. In that case, detention or seizure is not required. In that tune, what happens? 500 rupees each, 125. 500 CGST 500 rupees, SGST 500 rupees, 1000 rupees penalty you levy, and you leave the vehicle. These are all the small instances, the mistakes where a liberal view is adopted, and therefore the vehicle need not be detained or seized. Harmonized system of nomenclature is correct. Code number given to goods for determining harmonized system. It is an internationally accepted coding system. HSN is not a new concept which just came in GST. HSN is prevalent throughout the world. The categories what of the goods are given are throughout the world. In excise law also, before 2017, when excise duty law was there also HSN used to be applicable. The same HSN system is now there, and for each particular good, the respective GST rate has to be taken into consideration. Harmonized system of nomenclature, correct. Now we come to, these are the thing. Now we come to section 130, confiscation of goods or conveyances and levy of penalty. 129 speaks about the cases where the goods are detained or seized. 130 talks about confiscation, right? Seizure, detention is different. Seizure or detention will come if that fellow has agreed to the penalty or order, he will close it. But 130 speaks about confiscation. That means he will take over the goods totally and he will levy the penalty. In which cases this will come? What are the scenarios where the goods or conveyances are liable for confiscation? First one, any person supplies the goods or receives in contravention of the provisions, does not account for any goods for which he is liable to pay the tax. That means he is liable to pay the tax, but he is not accounting for that. He is supplying the goods liable to pay tax without applying for registration. Technically, the goods are liable to be taxed, but he is not applied for registration. He contravenes any provision, intention to evade payment of tax has to be there. And he uses the conveyance as a mean for transport in contravention of the provision or the rules unless the owner proves that it was used without his knowledge or connivance, or owner himself is agent, if any, and the person in charge of the conveyance. Now, what does this provision mean? So these four are pretty clear. But this provision, it says it gives a slight relaxation to the transporter. It says, see, if the transporter genuinely does not know that the goods are not supposed to be transported, he did not have any intention to defraud, it was done without the knowledge or association. Connivance means association of the owner or his agent of the vehicle. Then in that particular situation, the conveyance cannot be confiscated. I hope you get the point. So therefore, if the conveyance is used for the purpose of carriage of goods on contravention of the provisions, the conveyance also shall be confiscated unless the owner of the conveyance, he clearly proves that I am not involved in this. He has done this without my knowledge. In good faith, I have given him the vehicle for transporting the goods. So he has done the mistake. If he is able to prove that, then in that particular situation, the confiscation shall not be taken. Otherwise, conveyance also will be confiscated. Then all such goods shall be liable to confiscation and person shall be liable to penalty under 122. So if he does all of this, straight away they will confiscate and levy the penalty under 122, which we have discussed, those 122 subsection 1, 1A, B, etc. All those provisions will be attracted. Redemption fine. Now, what happens? He says that, you see, I will issue the penalty under 122. I will pay that penalty, no problem. But you please give me an option to redeem back the goods. Okay, to redeem back the goods, you give me an option. So therefore, the government has introduced the GST department under 130 subsection 2, which is something, fine, which is known as redemption fine. That means the owner of the goods are telling, sir, you don't confiscate my goods. Okay, you levy the penalty under 120, but please don't confiscate the goods. You please give back the goods to me. Because you are giving these goods back to me, I will give you a redemption fine. I'm redeeming back the goods, I'm giving you a redemption fine. So therefore, in this particular situation, in case of confiscation, the officer judging it shall give to the owner an option in lieu. In lieu means instead of confiscation, the officer will determine one fine. Now this fine is in addition to the tax and charges in respect of such goods. So this is just a facility which is given to the owner of the goods, saying that, okay, fine, you want your goods back, I will levy the penalty, no problem. But if you want the goods back to you, you have to pay this redemption fine. Now, this redemption fine, there is a limit which is prescribed under 130. The fine leviable, okay, the fine leviable should be less than or equal to market value of the goods confiscated, less tax chargeable there. So therefore, whatever is the value of the goods, including GST, from that you have to reduce the GST, whatever is to be charged. The fine leviable should be less than or equal to that particular amount. And fine plus penalty. Sometimes the officer will also levy a penalty in some cases. Now, if he is levying a penalty, the fine plus penalty both should be less than equal to penalty equal to 100% of tax payable on such goods. So therefore, fine is there, penalty is there. If it is only fine, it should be less than or equal to market value of the goods minus the tax payable. Now, if the fine plus penalty both are there, the total should be equal to 100% of the tax payable on such goods. So penalty should be equal to 100% of the tax payable on such goods. So therefore, fine plus penalty both has to be applicable. In that case, the limit is 100% of the tax payable on such goods. But again, here, market value of the goods also is there when it's fine is leviable. So sometimes what happens, he will levy the fine or he will levy the penalty. If he levies the fine, only the fine should be less than or equal to market value of the goods confiscated, less than tax. Now, if he is levying fine plus penalty, the penalty, whatever he is levying, should be less than or equal to 100% of the tax payable on such goods. Now, where that vehicle is used for carriage of the goods or passengers, in lieu of the confiscation, a fine equal to tax payable on such goods. So, very simple. Similar to an option given to the owner of the goods for redeeming his goods, a same option is given to the owner of the conveyance here as well. Owner of the conveyance also will be given an option. Instead of confiscating your conveyance, I will give the fine equal to tax payable on the goods which are transported. So therefore, basically the department views this confiscation, the detention, the seizure in a very, very serious manner. That is a conclusion in what we are discussing all this while. Okay. Therefore, when it comes to transporting the goods to your customer, please make sure, this is very, very important, that the rules of the GST law has to be followed in letter and spirit any time the inspection can happen. All of you should understand one thing. When the GST law first came into existence, for a lot of time, there was no requirement of e-way bill. They gave a lot of time for people to get used to the provisions of the law. Later, the electronic e-way bill came into existence. Earlier, the manual way bill only was there. They gave a lot of time for the taxpayers to get used to the situation. But then they realized it is high time a control is kept on the transport of goods and the vehicles used to transport of the goods. Only then it shall be able to clearly track the movement and whether it is being done properly and whether the provisions of the GST law are not being violated. Again, similar provisions as we discussed in the earlier 129 are covered here. Opportunity of being heard has to be given. Before you are doing the confiscation, no order of confiscation shall be given or no imposition of penalty shall be done without giving the person an opportunity of being heard. Okay. Then 135 and 6 speaks about the title and possession of confiscated goods. The title of confiscation goods or conveyance shall vest in the government, and the person, the proper officer who is adjudging the confiscation shall hold the possession of the things confiscated, and every officer of police on requisition shall assist him in taking and holding such possession. Fine. Title and possession of confiscated goods is covered under 135 and 6. Disposal is 130 subsection 7. After satisfying himself that the confiscated goods are not required in any other proceedings under the Act, after giving also a reasonable time, not exceeding 3 months, to pay the fine in lieu of the confiscation, he can dispose the goods or conveyance and deposit the sale proceeds with the government. These are the various provisions which speaks about confiscation of the goods and goods and conveyances, and also the subsequent levy of penalty. Again, 131 speaks about whatever the confiscation or penalty is done, it should not interfere with other punishments. Just because you are putting the confiscation or penalty, if that particular person is subject to penalties under some other law, just because it is confiscated, if there are provisions in some other law, it does not mean he is immune to such punishments. There should not be interference with other punishments. So therefore, whatever no confiscation which has been done shall prevent punishment to which person affected under provisions of this Act or any other law for the time being in force. Now, for example, he is transporting some hazardous goods. He is not maintaining proper safety protocols. GST does not come into picture there. Fire Safety Act will come into picture there, or pollution control will come into picture there. Now, in that provisions, some other punishments will be there, like arrest, prosecution, cancellation of registration, etc. These punishments will continue to apply on its own. Just because I'm confiscating and levying a penalty, it does not mean that this person is not liable to any other penalty under the GST. This is what is section 131 tries to say. Any queries till now? Yeah. Now we come to 132, which speaks about punishment for certain offenses. Now, 132, what it talks about, the main point here of 132 here is prosecution. 132 speaks about the main important point why 132 is there here. He speaks about the cases where prosecution is covered. The cases where prosecution is covered. So therefore, these offenses are the one of the most, I would say, bad or worse offenses under the GST. And the government ultimately has no other option, even though you are a businessman, even though you are not a criminal, but the degree of offense is such that the government does not have any other option but to arrest you or prosecute you and institute the legal proceedings under you. Fine. So therefore, formal charges will be given where the police department also will come into existence. But what all is covered here? Now, section 132 is a very, very tricky provision. You have to analyze it in a thorough manner. It has 2 to 3 concepts which are covered here. First thing is the concept of when the prosecution will apply. There is a quantum of tax default which is assigned to it. Only if you are defaulting to that extent, the prosecution will come. Apart from that, certain offenses are non-cognizable and certain are cognizable. What is the difference between non-cognizable and cognizable? The cognizable one offenses are bailable, non-cognizable are not bailable also. So therefore, these are the various aspects which are covered in section 132. So therefore, it is very, very important for us to understand what are the offenses which are covered under 132 and when the prosecution will come into existence and when it is a cognizable offense and when it is a non-cognizable offense. Fine. So that is what is covered in 132. In offenses and penalties chapter, 132 provision is one of the most important because questions have been asked from this particular section. So I would urge you to pay total attention to what we are discussing now. 132 subsection 1. So therefore, whoever commits or causes to commit, okay, and retains the benefit arising out of the following offenses. Now, these offenses are again mentioned here. Okay. First is the supply of goods or services without invoice. This A, B, C, D of 132.1 are very, very important because these subsections are given reference where the penalties are calculated. So these A, B, C, D, I generally don't ask you to remember the subsections and all, but when these subsections are clearly mentioned in another subsection where the penalties are there, it is suggested you remember this particular provision. So therefore, 132.1 A, B, C, D, I would request you to kindly remember it because it is very, very important for your understanding of the further subsections. So 132.1 supply goods or services or both without issue of invoice in violation of the provisions of the Act with the intention to evade the tax. So if you are making any supply of goods or services without invoice, the intention of tax evasion is there. Second one is if you are issuing the invoice without supply in violation of the provisions of the Act. So first one, you are supplying the goods or services without invoice. Second one, you are issuing the invoice or the bill without supply of goods or services. Third one, you are availing the ITC using the invoice or bill referred to clause number B, or you are fraudulently availing the input tax credit without any invoice or the bill. Okay. C is using the bill which is given under B. B here is a fake bill because there is no supply. So using that bill if you are availing the input tax credit, or you are fraudulently availing the input tax credit without the presence of a bill only. That is C. D1, if you are collecting any amount of tax, failing to pay beyond a period of 3 months. Okay. And E is evaded tax or fraudulently obtained refund where such offense is not covered under A to D. Okay. So therefore, these 5 subsections are important. This you have to remember. You don't have any other choice. I'll tell you why you have to remember in the further course of our discussion. 132.1 supplying the goods without invoice. B, issuing invoice without supply of goods. C, availing input tax with the fake bill mentioned in clause number B, or without any bill claiming input tax credit, or collecting the tax and not paying beyond a period of 3 months. These 4 A, B, C, D. 5 is evasion of tax or fraudulently claiming refund, or where the offense is not covered under A to D. Residuary clause is clause number. F is falsification or substituting the records. okay, or producing fake accounts or documents with the intention to evade the payment of tax. So you are falsifying your records, you are substituting your records, you are producing fake accounts or documents with the intention of evading the payment of tax. Then H is acquiring possession, transporting, depositing, keeping any goods which you have reason, which you feel that those such goods are liable to confiscation. You are storing those or you are transporting those. I is receiving in any way concerned with supply or in any other manner which he knows are in contravention of any other provision. That means you are receiving the goods which you know for a fact that there is contravention. Attempts to commit or abets the commission of any offences in A to F and H and I of this section. So these are the various offences which are there in 120. Now we come to the penalty here. Now, what is the offence specified and what is the penalty which is given? Now, why this 132 I said is prosecution? Because the onus is given on whether there should be prosecution and imprisonment based on the amount of tax which is involved here. What is the amount involved? So in first case, if you have made an offense of tax evasion, you have made an offense of input tax credit wrongly availed or refund wrongly taken. If you have evaded tax, you have wrongly claimed availed input tax credit, or you have utilized or refund you have wrongly taken. If the amount is more than 5 crores, the imprisonment up to 5 years and fine. So please remember, there is no option. There is no option here of paying fine and avoid imprisonment. Just look at the seriousness of the punishment here. There is imprisonment up to 5 years as well as fine which you are supposed to pay. Then, if it is more than 2 crores but less than or equal to 5 crores, imprisonment up to 3 years and fine. Another condition what he is putting. Just because up to 5 years is, you cannot say that imprisonment just for 10 days and over. I feel he has to be imprisoned only for 10 days, not more than that. That also is not possible because a condition is given that imprisonment shall be for a minimum period of 6 months in the absence of special and adequate reasons to the contrary to be recorded in the judgment of the court. So in the absence of proper, special and adequate reasons, the imprisonment shall be always for a minimum period of 6 months. Fine. So therefore, this is the offense and the respective penalty which is involved. Okay. And here, with regard to falsification of information, falsification of information with an intention to evade the tax, here there is no question of any amount involved because it is just falsification, basically fake information, fake documents, and intention to evade the tax is there. There is no question of any amount involved here. Here also imprisonment up to 6 months or with fine. So at least here he is not making imprisonment a mandatory thing. So imprisonment up to 6 months or fine or both as per the decision of the court can be levied. I hope this table is very important from the exam point of view. We will also be working out a problem based on this. So please make sure you don't get confused in any way with regard to the offense which is mentioned and the respective punishment which is given. For the second and every subsequent offense under section 132. Now, you made one offense, punishment is given. After that, if you make another offense, there is no limit to the amount involved. There is no limit at all. If you make a similar offense again, here imprisonment up to 5 years and fine straight away is given. Just you have made one offense, you served your prison and you are released. Again, you make the same type of offense. There is no question of any amount involved. Straight away, have imprisonment up to 5 years and fine is the punishment which is supposed to be given. Again, the condition here is minimum period of imprisonment should be 6 months in the absence of special and adequate reasons just be recorded in the judgment of the court. I hope these are clear. And the next one, cognizable and non-cognizable offenses, I had already discussed. What does this mean? Cognizable offenses is a serious category where the police officer has the authority to make an arrest without a warrant and to start an investigation with or without the court permission. Okay, very, very critical. So wherever a cognizable offense is there, it is a serious category of offenses where the police officer can has the authority to make an arrest without a warrant. Now, which is a cognizable offense under 132 is what we have to remember very clearly. Okay, so very serious category of offense is a cognizable offense, where the police officer has authority to make an arrest without a warrant and to start an investigation with or without the permission of the court. You cannot, if he comes and arrests you, he need not even have a warrant for arresting. Non-cognizable as relatively less serious. He does not have the authority to arrest without a warrant. Investigation cannot be initiated without a court order, except as may be authorized under any special legislation. Okay. So here the word tax shall include the amount of tax evaded or amount of ITC or refund which is wrongly taken. Now, this is an important table what you remember. This is the reason why I told you to remember that A, B, C, D point. Why did I tell A, B, C, D point? Because these particular offenses in certain specified cases are covered under cognizable and non-bailable. They are cognizable offenses and they are non-bailable. So therefore, without a warrant, you can get arrested. So ABCD, this is why you have to remember. What is ABCD again? Supply of goods without invoice, issue of invoice without supply. We're using the fake invoice referred in clause number B, claiming the credit or claiming the fraudulent input tax credit or collecting any amount and not paying to the government beyond a period of 3 months. This clause number A to D, which is punishable under clause I of the 132(1), where the amount involved is greater than 5 crores. Amount involved is greater than 5 crores. It is a cognizable and non-bailable offense. The next one, all residuary ones, all offenses other than those given under A, B, C, D and punishable under clause I of 132(1). Everything else is non-cognizable and bailable. So this differentiation is very important. You can expect a problem which is based on this particular aspect. Now, please try to work out this question. Examine the implications as regards the bailability and quantum of punishment or prosecution in respect of the following cases pertaining to month of December. X collects 245 lakhs as tax from his clients and deposits 241 lakhs with the central government. It is found that he has falsified the financial records and not maintained proper records. Okay. What is the penalty to be levied here? What is the penalty to be levied here? What is the implication? He is asking implications regarding bailability and quantum of punishments. Bailability and quantum of punishment is asking with regard to this one. He collects 245 lakhs and deposits 241 lakhs. Please try to answer this question. So here in this particular situation, he is collecting 245 lakhs from the clients and is depositing 241 lakhs with the central government. That means he has collected 245 lakhs and he has deposited 241 lakhs. So therefore, only 4 lakhs he has not deposited. So therefore, in this situation, if you go to these respective slides, now where he has taken the tag 132(1)D, this comes under clause D. So therefore, here what happens? The prosecution will come. The prosecution will come only if there is an amount involved. Okay, the amount involved is more than 2 crores but less than equal to 5 crores. So therefore, that provision will not come here. Here, the amount involved is less than rupees 2 crores. Why? Because though he has collected 245 lakhs, He has paid 241 lakhs. So only 4 lakhs. So therefore, imprisonment up to 3 years will not be applicable. However, if you see the question, he says that he has falsified the financial records. Please bear in mind, for falsification of financial records, there is no amount involved here. So therefore, here, however, in case of falsification of records, the imprisonment up to 6 months. You see in the slide here, imprisonment up to 6 months or with fine or both. This will be triggered. This will be triggered. Or fine will be applicable. And this one, why collects 550 lakhs but deposit 30 lakhs? Here one assumption you have to make that beyond 3 months he has not paid. That you have to clearly give in the exam solution, because it says that the tax should be paid beyond 3 months. So that assumption has to be made. So why collects 550 lakhs as tax from his clients but deposits only 30 lakhs with the central government? What about the second case? Anyone would like to answer? This is only a very tricky question. Here he has mentioned falsified financial records. So straight away you cannot presume that there is no prosecution applicability. Falsification of financial records is a major offense. Okay, because it threatens the economic fabric of the country. So that is why that is a very, very important, and that is why prosecution provision is given irrespective of any amount involved. That is the amount of prosecution provision which is given. Second case, it is very clear that he has deposited only 30 lakhs. So 5.2 lakhs he has not deposited. So straight away the prosecution imprisonment up to, since the quantum of default is more than 5 crores, imprisonment up to 5 years and fine will be applicable. And in absence of the special reasons, minimum period of 6 months of imprisonment has to be imposed on Y in the second case. I hope that is clear. And also, please mention that in case of the second case, it is very much a non-bailable and cognizable offense. Fine. So that was your 132, very important section for us from the examination point of view. Now we come to other small sections. Another big section, and this is only compounding of offenses. Before that, it has some small sections which we shall run through here now. So 133 speaks about liability of officer and certain other persons. So therefore, here what it says. Now, just in the same way, the liability, offences, penalties are imposed on the taxpayer. Similar way, in some cases, on certain other persons or the officers also, the penalties will be applicable. Now, what happens usually? Now, most of the departmental officers or who are in control have access to a lot of sensitive information, because the moment you are giving your GST, you are filing your GST returns with the GST department, you are mentioning your turnover. Now, I'll take an example. Now, there are two businessmen, X Limited and Y Limited. Both are in the purchase and sale of electronics. Now, Y Limited has a relative who is working in the GST department, and he wants to know the turnover of X Limited. So Y Limited speaks to that his person and says that since you have access to the GST returns and all, you will know what is the turnover this person is disclosing and what is the input tax credit he is claiming, who are the vendors from where he is purchasing, what are the rates at which he is purchasing. All this information you give to me. Now the GST officer, he will remove that information and give it to him, due to which this person will know what are the prices and accordingly develop his business strategies based on access to sensitive information. So here, this is what is the important point here. That is why 133 provision is there. So any person is engaged in the collection of statistics under 151 or compilation or computation thereof, where any information has access to information under 150 subsection 1. We will discuss 150 in our next topic, next chapter. Basically, any sort of information with regard to returns, GST information, etc. If any person engaged in connection with provision of service willfully discloses any information or contents of any return furnished under the Act, otherwise than in execution of his duties, or for the purpose of prosecution for any offense. See, he can disclose the information if he is called upon by the seniors. He shall be punished by imprisonment up to 6 months or with fine, which may extend up to 25,000 or with, right? This is the provision which is given for the person's penalty of liability of officer and certain other persons. Because right from the computer analyst and the typist in the GST department, everyone will have access to the sensitive information. Of course, they'll have some encryptions, etc., but most of them will have access. And also prosecution for offense under 133. In case of government servants, it has to have previous sanction by the government only. In case of person other than the government servant, with the previous sanction of commissioner, the prosecution can be completed. Then you have the other 134, cognizance of offences. No court shall take cognizance of offence under this Act or rules except with the previous sanction of the commissioner, and no court inferior to that of a magistrate of the first class shall try any such offence. So therefore, in this case, the previous sanction of the commissioner has to be there for any court to take cognizance of such offence and issuance of the order against that particular person. Previous sanction of the commissioner is very, very important, and minimum court should be magistrate of the first class who is trying such offence. 135 talks about presumption of a culpable mental state. Now, mens rea or culpable mental state is very, very important for the purpose of prosecution, because you simply cannot prosecute and institute legal proceedings without ascertaining the fact whether the defaulter had an intention, motive, and a knowledge to defraud. Okay, that is very, very important. Culpable mental state has to be there, and in this case, the court shall presume the existence of that culpable mental state. Okay, because in a lot of these cases, the department would have done inquiries, investigations, taken responses. So when it comes to the court for passing an order, it need not again verify whether this person is did not have culpable mental state. It is, however, the duty of the or defense mechanism of the accused to prove the fact that no mental state exists. Okay, intention, motive, knowledge of a fact, and belief to reason a fact. So therefore, this has to be there at the time of commencing the offense. The court shall presume it because of the various checks which have been done by the commissioner and other levels. But however, if the accused wants to prove that he was not in a culpable mental state or he did not have mens rea, in that particular situation, he has to prove it. Only the court believes to exist beyond reasonable doubt, not merely when its existence is established by a preponderance of probability. What do you mean by preponderance of probability? Just because that person says, I am a mad person, I did not have the intention of evading the tax. Just because he says that, the court cannot believe. It is a probable situation. That is why the court, if there is no culpable mental state, it has to be existing beyond reasonable doubt. That is, it has to be clearly mentioned. It has to be clearly mentioned and proved that this person may be a doctor's certification or anything for that matter. It has to be proved that it did not have any culpable mental state. Only then the court will take that into consideration. Otherwise, the court will not take that into consideration at all. I hope we are clear on this. 136 speaks about relevancy of statement under circumstances. Now, what happens? In many cases, a statement which is signed by the person is relevant for the purpose of truth of the facts. Sometimes where the person is not available and the person has signed such statement, that statement shall be very much taken into account for the purpose of the proof. So whenever the summons are issued under 70, During the course of inquiry or proceedings, he has given some information, he has signed on the statement and given. Because how a summons work? Usually the summons is given by the officer to the taxpayer. A date is given, he has to appear before the taxpayer and he has to produce the information which is asked for by the officer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all information he will submit, he will sign and give it to the departmental tax officer. The moment he gives that signed and given to the respective departmental officer here, and later that person cannot be found or he dies, then whatever that signed statement in response to the summons is there, that has to be taken into consideration for the purpose for the court to make the decision. So therefore, any statement which is made and signed by the person on appearance in response to the summons or during any inquiry or proceeding under the act shall be relevant for the purpose of proving the truths of the facts in case of prosecution of any offense. Where the person who made the statement is dead or cannot be found or incapable of or kept out of the way by the adverse party or whose presence cannot be obtained, under case the court considers unreasonable. In that case, whatever he has given the statement, that shall be relevant for the purpose of proving the truth. This is the important phrase here which you have to keep bear it in mind. This whatever statement is made and signed by the person shall be relevant for the purpose of proving the truth, especially when he is dead or when he cannot be found, when he is incapable of giving evidence. Basically, that other party must have bribed him or something for that matter is not available. That second case where the statement shall be considered relevant for the purpose of proving the truth of the facts, where the person who made the statement is examined as a witness in the case and the court is of the opinion, having regard to the circumstances, the statement should be admitted in the evidence in interest of justice. So whenever that particular person as a witness tells something and the court feels that he has been issued a summons, and in response to the summons he has given an explanation that is relevant for the purpose of our understanding, then this has to be taken into consideration. Now we come to the next point, offenses which is made by companies. Now what happens? Now, if an offense is made other than companies by individuals is there, or in that case, straight away the penalty will be made by penalty will be imposed on the respective person or the proprietor. But if the offense is made by the companies, then on whom the penalty has to be levied? This is a very important point, because company will be there. Anyways, penalty will be levied on the company. But apart from that, if also there is a manager of the company, the director of the company who has played a substantial role in the commission of such offense, they are also covered in the respective of imposition of penalties. So therefore, where offense has been committed by a person being a company, again here company means body corporate, also includes a firm or association of individuals. Every person who at the time the offense was committed was in charge of, was responsible to the company for conduct of the business, shall be deemed to be guilty and shall be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. This is what 137(1) says. So whenever the offense was committed, whoever person was in charge of the company and was responsible to the company, again, he need not be a director. Director is anyways covered. Apart from the director, if any CFO or the head person is there, he is also be covered. He shall also be deemed to be guilty of the offense and he shall also be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. However, where the offense that has been committed by the company, it is proved that the offense is committed with the consent or connivance with support, or is attributable to negligence part of the director, manager, secretary, even company secretary is covered, or officer of the company. Such director, manager, secretary shall also be deemed to be guilty and they are also liable to be punished accordingly. So an important point here is, first one, whoever is there at the company, who is responsible for the conduct of the business, etc., he shall be deemed to be guilty of the offense, proceeded liability. And it is also very clear, because see, some directors are just independent directors. They are not involved in the affairs of the company. You cannot proceed against them. If you want to proceed against the director, manager, secretary, etc., you have to be sure that it has been done with the consent or support of that particular person they will also be deemed to be guilty of such offense, and they will also be liable to be proceeded against and punished accordingly. In case of a limited liability partnership, if any offense is committed, or HUF or trust, you can punish the partner, the karta of the HUF, managing trustee, they shall be deemed for that offense, shall be liable to be proceeded against, punished accordingly. Again, here, director, whatever explanation is there in section 137, director in relation to firm means a partner of the firm. Nothing contained in the section shall render such punished liable to any punishment provided if he proves that offense was committed without his knowledge. Again, this director, manager, secretary, or whoever he is, if he is able to prove that whatever has happened and whatever offense has been committed was done without his knowledge, if he is able to prove that, then in that particular situation, there will not be any penalty which is applicable to that particular person. So 138 is compounding of offenses. Default of more than 5 crores, imprisonment for 5 years and fine. All of you, please make sure that you give the answers in the correct, proper manner in the examination. Please refer to the provision. You need not remember the section names. Please believe me, in my CA examinations, what I've written, not even a single, because when I used to write the examination, I always, when in my mind, 2 sections used to come. When I'm thinking of whether this is the section, whether this section is correct or that section is correct, 2 sections will come in my mind. Now, one of them is right, one of them is wrong. I used to take a chance and write the one section, which 99% that used to be wrong. Then I realized it is futile to mention the respective section number. Just write according to the provisions of the CGST Act 2017. Please note, don't rack your brains or be stressed about remembering sections and subsections for the CA examination. If you have good memory, if you are very confident about your memorizing skills, then you remember the section and the subsection. Otherwise, please don't bother about it. Here, the conceptual knowledge is stressed upon. The testing is happening on the basis of the conceptual skills, what is being imbibed by the students. How much of the concept you have understood, that is more focused on, rather than just remembering section numbers. It is not some memory contest, but it is not some who is able to remember what sections he's going to get more marks, otherwise he's not. We are not testing on that. Testing is only on conceptual clarity. Don't break your heads on the section number remembering. That is my tip for today. Be it any subject, not necessarily GST. Just write according to the provisions of the CGST Act 2017. This is what I used to do. And because of that, I never lost marks. I used to do a calculation once I finished the paper. Due to that, I never lost any marks in the total what I used to put. So please bear in mind, it is not required. Don't worry about remembering things. So now, compounding of offenses. Now, as I told you before, compounding of offenses basically refers to in case before prosecution. Now, this particular person says that, sir, don't initiate prosecution against me. I will do something, I will pay some amount, and let's avoid prosecution. That is what is covered under 138. Any offense may be compounded by the commissioner, either before or after the institution of prosecution, payment of the compounding amount in the manner as may be prescribed by the person accused of such offense to the central government or the state government, as the case may be. On receipt of application from applicant, he will call for a report from the concerned officer with reference to the particulars which may be considered relevant for the examination of such application. Okay, so here what will happen? The compounding, first he will do, application has to be made by the applicant. Once the application is made, the commissioner will call for a report with reference to whatever is mentioned, whatever is considered relevant. Once he is satisfied that the applicant has cooperated in the proceedings, made full disclosure of the facts, he may allow the application indicating the compounding amount. Amount will be mentioned. He will grant immunity from prosecution, or he will reject such application within 90 days of the receipt of the application. Fine. So he will either accept and mention the amount, grant him immunity. 90 days is there for him to decide. Within 90 days, he can either reject it. Again, application has to be decided only after giving opportunity of being heard. You cannot decide without giving opportunity of being heard. Principles of natural justice has to be followed. In case of rejection of compounding application, you have to clearly record the grounds or reasons for the same. Also, application shall not be allowed unless the tax, interest, penalty has to be paid. See, tax, interest, penalty are basic things. So these three has to be paid, only then the compounding application will be allowed. Okay. Compounding is for prosecution. So for compounding application, if you don't pay the tax, interest, penalty also, that commissioner will not be interested in any way for giving the compounding. Once the order is given, in case the compounding amount is mentioned there, he has to pay the compounding amount as ordered by the commissioner, shall furnish the proof of payment to him. If he fails to pay the compounding amount, whatever compounding is, it shall be vitiated, it shall be void. So within 30 days, he has to pay the compounding amount. If he does not pay within 30 days, that compounding order itself is null and void. Okay. Now, the following offences shall not be compounded. Now, these are basically things where slightly multiple subsections are involved. So, what are the offences to be compounded? What shall not be compounded is given here. So, this requires a more detailed understanding. I don't want to rush it because we are just a few minutes away from the conclusion of the class. So, therefore, I will conclude here. Tomorrow's session, I will start off with again looking at section 138, compounding of offences. And after that, I will also look at ethical aspects under GST, which has to be covered. Ethical aspects is basically speaks about the role of a chartered accountant in GST. And also few case studies, which is there in the study material, we shall cover and discuss what are the actions to be taken in various situations by the chartered accountant. And also, if time permits, we will also start the chapter on appeals and revisions. If the time permits, we'll also start on that chapter post conclusion of these respective case studies. So therefore, to summarize what all we have discussed today, we covered sections 122 to 138 of CGST Act 2017, which spoke about the multiple offences which are to be committed and the respective penalties which are leviable. So if you just a quick go through, basically penalty for 21 offences mentioned on 122, we spoke about various offences. What is the penalty to be required? That also we have covered. 122 1A is basically on whose instance the offence are conducted. For that also the penalty is mentioned. 122 1B speaks about the e-commerce operator penalty, and then penalty for certain offences, specified offences are there. In that particular situation is also where fraud, willful misstatement is there. Fraud, willful misstatement is not there. That is covered here in the 122 subsection 2. 122 subsection 3, aid or abetting offences, that is covered here. 124, furnishing statistics, there is a fine for that. General residuary penalty, 125. 126, general disciplines relating to penalty. In the cases where the amount is not fixed percentage or not a fixed sum, certain things has to be taken into existence before levying of the penalty. Then power to impose penalty in certain cases, 127. Apart from the regular provisions in other respective sections, the proper officer can also have a power to impose the penalty under section 127. Right? Power to waive the penalty under 128 is given. The most important section is detention, seizure, release of goods and convey, 129. 129 and 132 sections are very, very important. Please bear in mind these, you have to be very, very careful. What is the procedure for the detention, seizure, when he will release the goods, when he comes forward for the payment, when he does not come forward for the payment, all those things are covered here. We saw the entire flow of the section 129, interception cases where it is not initiated, etc. 130 is also very important, confiscation of goods or conveyances and levy of penalty. In this case also redemption fine is there, opportunity of being heard. Finally, he will dispose if he is not respective paying the tax. 132 for these offences, again, prosecution related stuff. If you just discussed, I hope it is clear for all of you. Any queries, please keep posting so that I will just check. These are other small provisions. We completed till 137 and a brief of 138. So tomorrow we will complete 138 in detail, and then we will look at the ethics part of GST and the respective case studies. And also, if time permits, we'll also cover the topic of appeals and revisions. So with this, we come to the end of today's class. So what I will do is I will upload this entire PDF in the respective link. I would urge you to go through it one more time to refresh your memories, to make sure that the concepts stay in your mind without you forgetting. Just 5 to 10 minutes of your brushing through is important, so that they keep retaining on your heads. And also one important another tip what I wanted to give you is, please write down the important points. In this electronic generation and everyone is on the phone or on the laptop listening and typing everything on Word, Excel, I say the concept of writing with a pen will never age for me, because the moment you write some important points with the pen, it always stays in your head. Please remember, one time writing is equal to 10 times reading. Because the moment you write without, you just understand the provision, write on your own, make pointers, the impact is much more, it's another level altogether. The concept will stay in your mind. So please make brief notes for all the respective provisions. So thank you very much for attending today's class. It was good addressing all of you. Thank you for being lively. Thank you for being interactive. If you feel any provisions have to be discussed again, we will again discuss, no problem. Since I'll anyways come again tomorrow to continue this topic. Any doubts in today's topic or in the course of revision, if you come across which you felt that it was a bit confusing, or you feel that further clarity is required, we will again discuss the respective section and get the proper clarity on that aspect. Fine. So see you tomorrow, everyone. Good night and take care.